Good afternoon and welcome to the Perris High School Special Board Meeting of April 20th, 2020. The board will be respecting recent orders from the Government of California and Health Office of the County of Riverside and guidelines for the Center of Disease Control related to maintaining public health and safety at this time. Consistent with these orders and guidelines, this meeting will be held online only, and there will be no physical meeting location open to the public. The board encourages members of the public to join the meeting electronically. So with that said, we're going to go to item 2.1, which is the call to order. We've already called to order at 2:30 p.m. I'm going to ask for a roll call to determine a quorum. So we'll go with Dr. Rao.
Here.
Oh, there he is. Hello, Jose. Okay. Trustee Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Freeman. Dr. Freeman was not able to make it today, so we'll document him as not here. And Trustee Dellison.
Here.
Okay. And myself, Anthony Stafford. Okay. I have established a quorum with 4 present and 1 absent. And all items requiring a vote will be an oral vote for this meeting, although we will not be voting on anything this meeting. That still had to be said. So at this time, we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone would stand. And ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to item 3.1, invitation to address the Board of Trustees on non-agendized items.
We have one that was submitted in to be read into. We have 2.
Okay.
I'm going to have to figure out where the second one is. This first one, this is from Lisa Towery, the Labor Relations Representative for CSEA, Perris Valley, Chapter 469. She says, Good afternoon, Board President Stafford, Board members, Superintendent Bennett, and Cabinet. She has 6 points that she would like to have read in. It's CSEA and PUHSD, specifically Assistant Superintendent Kirk Skorpanich and Director Nick Hilton, have a collaborative relationship. I'm proud of our relationship since we can address all items honestly and expeditiously. We take the time to resolve issues and not get mired in political nonsense. In my shoes, all the district CSEA representatives do not act in this manner. Her second point, CSEA's Government Relations Office works closely with the Governor's Office and the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman. Those districts who are bad actors are reported to both entities. PUHSD is not a bad actor. Thank you. Her third point, we received word that the district wants to begin deep cleaning your schools. Quite frankly, these are not essential services. The schools have not been prepared for deep cleaning. Classrooms need to be emptied and boxed up and put away by staff, teachers, health office, library, locker room, etc. It may seem like the ideal opportunity to begin deep cleaning, but again, the district is choosing to expose more workers to the COVID-19 virus by conducting non-essential services. Number 4, not only would you put your members in harm's way, but their family as well. Currently, it is highly recommended when you come home from work to leave your shoes outside and if possible, go directly in and take a shower and immediately wash your clothing. Most frontline workers even quarantine themselves away from their family. Number 5, CSEA and the district will go to the table this Friday to negotiate a new MOU since the current one expires on April 30th. At the time we negotiated the agreement, we couldn't imagine school closing for the entire year. I would like for you to reconsider the service that you're asking our members to perform. Do we have to do this now, or can it wait till summer? I'm trying to. So that was Ms. Towery's.
And Ms. Towery's title again is
She's the CSEA representative for this local region.
Okay, yeah,
She's the labor relations rep. That's her official title.
okay.
The next one is from Mr. Josh Rush, and he's the CSEA chapter president for Perris Valley 469. And again, he says, good afternoon, board president, staff and board members, Superintendent Bennett and cabinet. At the last special board meeting, held on March 10th, 2020, there were some reports that recently came back to CSA that there were some conversations regarding sanitizing the campuses and even now to buy new foggers to help with this task. Since then, I am unaware of the machines to be used for sanitizing have been delivered at 2 sites, but instead the custodians were given Hudson sprayers, like the ones you buy for garden and use at home. Another concern that I heard is as a result of the special meeting was the need to institute deep cleaning at our sites by custodial personnel. As I'm sure the board can understand, CSEA has a desire to hold off on deep cleaning of our campuses since the rooms as of now have not been shut down like they normally would have been for the teachers that occupy them. This would make deep cleaning a concern since there are numerous things that can affect our members. An example could be by being accused of throwing out teacher supplies or even theft. Another issue is that our custodians could possibly have to deep clean the rooms twice before the next school year. On top of the above mentioned concerns, the main concern in regards to starting deep cleaning is that in our minds, it's not an essential activity in order to keep our schools running. We currently have rotation in place to address the cleaning of the admin buildings at all sites as well as the kitchens in order to make sure they're cleaned and sanitized, and to have a negotiation scheduled for this Friday to extend our MOU that sunshines April 30th. And any effects that have come up since the original one was negotiated, seems like a rush to move forward with deep. I'm not, let me. I can't seem to get to the other ones, the rest of that, Anna.
Is there any way we could get those statements emailed to us so we could read them because of the breaks in between?
Hold on, Edward.
No problem.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand their statements. That's all.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
Okay, let me continue. I had some struggles there. On top of the above mentioned concerns, the main concern in regard to is to start deep cleaning now in our minds is not an essential activity in order to keep our schools running. We currently have a rotation to place to address the cleaning of admin buildings at all sites as well as kitchens in order to make sure they're clean and sanitized, and have a negotiation scheduled this Friday to extend our MOU that sunshines on the 30th of April. And any effects that have come up since the original one was negotiated, it seems like there is a rush to move forward with deep cleaning and sanitizing before all issues can be addressed. I would like to add the deep cleaning has been placed on hold as of last Friday night due to the collaborative relationship CSEA has with PUHSD and specifically the HR department and our ability to work through issues. I've said it before, and if not, I will say it now. I want PUHSD to be the example of the district to get through these uncertain times by ensuring the safety of all employees, classified, confidential, and certificated. As always, thank you for your continued support. Josh Rushing, CSEA Chapter President, Perris Valley 469. And that concludes the remarks that have been submitted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bennett. Were there any comments that came in just under the wire or after? I thought I knew someone that might have wanted to make comments, but I don't think you have them. No, nothing. Okay. Okay, so Move to the item 4.1, which is the study session. The Board of Trustees will conduct a study session regarding COVID-19. And at this point, we'll go in order, I suppose, for each trustee for any comments. So let's start. Who would like to begin? Anybody? Or do we need to listen to the presentation first?
I think we should listen to the presentation.
That's what I was going to suggest. We do the presentation first, and then we can.
It popped up. Okay, let's listen to the presentation, and then we'll have our study session afterwards. How do we advance it?
You have a copy of the PowerPoint on your screen.
I do. Now, am I to?
Miss Fetzner is going to change the slides for us as we work through.
So, do we have someone to read this, or I'm reading
Well,
this?
we're going to have presentations as we go through by each of the different departments.
Okay.
So the board would just would see the slides coming up and listen to what's being talked about as we work through.
Okay. So who do we begin with?
I started out.
Okay. Who's up? You started out, Grant? Okay.
I'm the lead up hitter, yes.
We'll go from there. Okay.
So slide 2. Before we get into the real meat of the presentation, I do want to say how proud I am of the team that we have here in the Perris Union High School District that have been working on this. There's no one working in silos as we continue to work to figure out how we're going to handle the end of the school year, the beginning of next school year, the cleaning, all those different things. You know, we have a risk management team that's been doing a great job of making sure we're getting things out to people. Our human resources team has been working with both unions to make sure we have MOUs that are good for both sides. Ed Services put such a great plan together for our distance learning, and the folks over there are working hard to make sure the kids are still getting the education they need. And that couldn't happen without our technology department, who's making sure that our distant learning is working. They're giving kids Chromebooks who haven't had them, that never checked them out because the parents didn't want them at the time. You know, our nutrition services every day out there serving. Oh, we're not doing it every day now, but we're serving 5 meals a week to the kids on 2 to 3 days a week. Our business office, making sure that we have what we need to do our job. M&O with the cleaning they're doing and the work that they do to keep our schools up and running. And of course, our school board, who has been very supportive of the programs that we've been putting in place thus far. You know, looking at the session overview, we're going to hear today about the county and state updates on directives. And that's very important because that's where we get our direction on what we're doing and how we can handle some different things. You know, we're going to hear again, like I talked about, we're going to hear from our human resources department on what they're doing to make sure that people are safe and coming to do their essential jobs. You know, distance learning again through Ed Services, technology, all these different departments. You're going to hear something from each of these people on what we're doing to meet the needs of our students and our staff to keep everybody safe and healthy. And then we'll have a reopening plan kind of considerations because we don't know when we get to do the reopening how it's going to actually look. Will we be able to be there every day? Will we be able to have every student there every day? Or we have to do some different options as we move forward. A lot of unknowns there. And we'll conclude with our next steps. So Anna, if you could switch the slide. So at this point, I'm going to ask Judy Miller to step in and talk to us about what's been happening through risk management, our multi-agency support and coordination. Judy, it's yours. Miss Miller.
There you go. Now you can hear me.
You're good.
Yes.
I appreciate the opportunity to participate. Kind of going to pick up a little bit where we left off on March the 10th, and we're still considering, we're working with University Health System, Public Health, at the link to the rivcoph.org website. That's where a lot of everything, all the updates that are being posted, a lot of resources there. Dr. Cameron Kaiser, he's a public health officer. That's primarily where we're getting our orders and direction from. They've done a little bit of a change. They did have the medical component along with the EMD, emergency management. Now it's strictly emergency management. Misty Plumley is the duty chief, so they have the county EOC, Emergency Operations Center, working together with public health. And then, of course, Riverside County Office of Ed, Mike D'Amico, he's Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, and he actually has a seat at the county EOC Emergency Operations Center. So he has a seat that represents schools. So a lot of this information also comes down from Mike. We have continued to participate in at least weekly. Sometimes it could be 3 times a week or once a week. There's conference calls and updates from the county. We have them at the school emergency level, public information level, what they call the OA operational area level. And then of course, nurses are involved in those calls as well. So that continues to happen. There's press conferences at the state, local and national level. And either myself or Candace and probably others too, that are continuing to watch and participate, or at least monitor the press conferences. And then the daily updates from ribco.org, that's where they're posted on the website. So that's just an overview so you understand where all this is coming from. Can you go to the next slide? So what we've done is kind of put together a timeline, and there's links to all these orders. So if you start on, and I'll even start for the first conference call we had with the county, we reported that back in March. We started on February the 4th was the first conference call. And then on February 5th is when the district started posting messaging on the website. And that's a link to all the messages you'll find to the community about COVID-19. February, everyone was kind of watching it. Then we had conference calls every week. And then in March 8th is when the county actually declared the local health emergency. I believe we reported that to you on March 10th because it didn't get ratified by the Board of Supervisors till March 10th. It was actually this why we were in that session with our school board. And then on the 12th, so on the 12th, which was, I got this written down. So on Sunday, March 8th was a Sunday, and that's when they declared the local health emergency. They got it ratified a couple days later at their board meeting. On Thursday, March 12th, because of what we heard on the calls and the district proactively postponed all extracurricular and athletic events through the end of spring break. And then later on that same day is when the county limited gatherings to 250 people. So this is a very fluid situation. It kept changing. March 13th, the very next day, the county ordered schools to be closed through April 3rd. And then what did that mean? No one exactly, what did that mean? That meant students, that means staff. And so we knew for sure it would mean students. So on Friday the 13th, that's a great day for that, right? The district notified all employees to stay home the following Monday. That was March 16th. That would be the first day that schools were closed. Didn't know exactly what that meant for staff. So everyone was told to stay home. There was a few staff that were working, but mostly it was just the meal service employees providing the meal service to the community and to the students. So that was Friday. So look at that date, Friday, March 13th. We're told everyone stays, the schools are closed. And then on March 16th, that next Monday, all employees are home. And then we start getting more updates from the county. We had the first death that was reported in the county, and also went from Thursday, gatherings were limited to 250. And then we've got Monday, gatherings are now limited to 10. And so again, this fluid situation kept changing. Next slide, please. So the 16th of March, this continued. So that's the first day schools were closed. We had, that's where a lot of planning was taking place, trying to determine and identify essential staff and initiate that essential staff rotation. The very next day on March 17th, the county extended that school closure to April 30th. So on the 13th, which was a Friday, they closed schools till April 3rd. And then Tuesday, just a few days later, now the school closure was extended to April 30th. So again, this very rapidly changing fluid situation. 2 days later, on March 19th, now the governor of the state of California issues a stay-at-home order. Again, we had essential workers that had been identified and started to work just 2 days before or 3 days before. And now everyone's told to stay home. We're not sure what that means. And so again, the district notifies all essential employees to stay home on Friday, March 20th, except the meal service employees. And then on March 24th, there was some questions brought through from CSEA about meal distribution and some safety issues. So I worked with Josh Rushing, and March 25th to March 27th, we called it a road show. Essentially, when you're talking about any safety concerns, our injury illness prevention plan, that's all part of OSHA and the occupational health safety part of what I do. We actually did a hazard assessment. So from March 25th to the 27th, we went and visited each site where meal distribution was taking place. We went to a couple other districts to see what they were doing, got some ideas, and then we came up with a plan that was initiated over the weekend and put in place on Monday, March 30th, to address those issues. And so on March 30th, we were able to create that physical distancing to make sure that employees remain safe. March 31st, the very next day, which was Tuesday, the county recommended face coverings, and I believe that was in the afternoon. That came in like probably 3:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday the 31st. They were talking about covering the face. Up until then, they kept saying if you're well, you don't need to wear anything. They were discouraging it, and then on the 31st, they recommended covering your face as an option. It wasn't required. And so that afternoon, we ordered one of the examples given were bandanas, fabric masks, or neck gaiters. And so that afternoon, we ordered bandanas for staff to have as an option. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so 31st, we ordered the bandanas, and then at the same time that evening, we delivered surgical masks to the school sites and departments to be used by essential employees in the interim. So we were offering it because it wasn't a requirement. April 1st, very next day, the county health extends that school closure now to June 19th. So if you just continue to look at those dates, how close in proximity they are to each other. April 3rd, bandanas had come in and we delivered them to the school sites as an option to comply with the face covering recommendation. And then the very next day on April 4th, now the county is saying it's not a recommendation, now it's required. So everyone leaving their house, it's required to cover your nose and your mouth to help, not necessarily protect you. The whole idea was to help prevent the spread, potentially protect other people around you. And then on April 18th, surgical masks were delivered to school sites and departments for essential workers to use as another option to comply with the face covering order when they're working. You can go to the next slide and the next presenter.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. And so I'll pick up from there. So as Judy talked about, we've had a really fast moving timeline in terms of a lot of things. And it really triggered on that the afternoon of that Friday, March 13th, when we got the notice that all schools were going to close, and then that has an effect on our employees. And so obviously we're here. All of our employees are government employees because we're providing a service to our community. And normally that service is education and where we're teaching our kids. But when this happened, there was a lot of uncertainty within our employee groups. And we employ over 1,000 employees in the Perris High School District. So one of the things we immediately went into a mode where we were reassuring our employees of what's happening. Because when schools closed, one of the first questions we started getting from staff was, well, what does that mean for me? Do I still get paid? Do I not get paid? How does that affect my sick leave? What if I get ill? What happens there? And so following that closure on the very next Monday, the very next business day, which was Monday the 16th, we provided reassurance to all of our employees, both our classified employees and our certificated employees, in terms of what their status was. And so each of them received a different letter because the needs of those employee groups are a little bit different. But But some of the things that we made sure that we guaranteed to all of our employees is that all of them would remain in full paid status and retain their benefits throughout the closure. And at that point in time, we assumed that it would be just until early April. But as Judy just mentioned, it's been progressing, and the most recent one was through the end of the school year, and now there's even talk about beyond that. So we assured all of our employees that they would continue to receive their full pay and salary throughout the entire closure. We also, at the time, initially told our employees to remain off of school property until they were authorized otherwise. And again, that was not only to protect themselves, but to protect others. We asked our employees to be available during the regular working hours. So if we needed to contact them, we could, and our employees have been complying with that. We asked them to check their PUHSD email regularly to make sure that if we wanted to communicate to them, we had a way to communicate with all of our employee groups. Because sometimes we forget that if we send all of people home from a site, there's still phone calls that come into the central office that need to go out to site or site offices and things like that. So since everyone was out to communicate to our employee group and our individual employees, we want to make sure that they check their email. Many of our employees started asking because it was in close proximity to spring break. And at the time, we had a lot of people saying, well, what happens during spring break? Since I'm taking that time off now, can I still take time off then? And so we assured them that they could still take their time off during their spring break. We identified groups of essential work that needed to be done. And that essential work really hasn't changed much. The essential work is providing the grab and go meals to our students, cleaning our schools, and then ultimately providing educational services to our students. So at the time, we didn't know we were going to do distance learning, but we had told our certificate employees specifically to prepare for that in the event that happens. We also talked to our employees about the fact that we would be establishing rotation schedules. So the burden of reporting if they were providing an essential service and they couldn't do it remotely wasn't on just one individual or one small group of individuals. That we were going to be developing a rotating schedule, so no one had to report all the time. And we've continued that process through now. We also developed a temporary sick leave policy, and I'll talk specifically about that because our employees had a lot of concerns and worries as they related to what happens if I get sick, what happens if my child gets sick, what happens if I don't, what happens if I'm a vulnerable population and because I don't want to become sick, what happens if I'm quarantined, all of those kinds of questions started coming up. So we immediately developed a policy to address that that's unique from what we were doing prior to that. And that policy also included provisions for childcare if those were needed. And then the other thing we did in working with both of our bargaining units is we developed a frequently asked question sheet, or an FAQ. So as people were asking questions, we kind of put those in so that we could answer the questions, so everyone was reassured of their positions within our district as we went through this. And a lot of it we were just doing based on the best information we had at the time. And fortunately, in hindsight, it's worked out to be really beneficial for us all the way across the board. So one of the things I mentioned we immediately instituted on that first business day after the school closure was we implemented a temporary sick leave policy. And that was also an opportunity of addressing the fears that our employees had as they related to catching the virus or being quarantined by the virus and the effects they would have on them as a person, because they wanted to provide the services to our community, but they have their family and they wanted to make sure that they were protected themselves. So some of the things that we did with that temporary sick leave policy is we said that if an employee was asked to report to work and didn't feel as though they could report to work because they were concerned for their own safety, that they could actually use sick leave as a result of that. And that's different than what we had before, because previous to that, they would have had to use personal discretion or personal necessity or some type of personal leave. But the temporary sick leave policies allowed them to use that sick leave if they didn't want to report, because they're like, I just don't even want to open myself up to any chances at that point in time. The second thing we did is we also implemented a policy that said that if an employee is quarantined because of an illness to themselves or an illness to a family member, so someone in their family so as a result they're quarantined because of that, then they would be able to earn paid leave during that period of quarantine without fear of that coming out of their accumulated sick leave or anything like that. And so we had a couple of our employees that take advantage of that or were obligated to take advantage of that because they were actually quarantined or a family member was quarantined and they had to stay home. And so that didn't harm their accumulated sick leave at all or require them to take any additional leave. All of this happened before the state and federal government changed their laws and their rules regarding the sick leave policy. So this was a policy we put in place again on March 16th early on, and we've continued to follow through with it because it's the state and federal government have kind of caught up with what we did on that very first business day where we were closed. Um, we also, as part of that policy, said if a person is exhibiting those characteristics or qualities, symptoms of COVID-19, and we sent them home, then we would be sending them home on paid leave without them having to utilize their accumulated sick leave either. And the intent behind that is we didn't want someone to go, I'm not sure if I'm sick or not. I want to come to I want to come to work, and then get other people sick. And so if we sent them home, we quarantined them, even though they hadn't seen a doctor yet, because some of them were having difficulty at the time, just like now going to the doctor, then again, that was paid leave on us without affecting their accumulated sick leave. Employees had questions because all of schools closed immediately at the time. So employees had questions as they related to childcare, and we reassured everybody of the labor code 230.8, which allowed them to utilize leave to take care of their children if their children weren't sick or if they needed to do something else. And we continue to remind them of that. We also quickly identified vulnerable populations within our employee groups, and those are individuals that are over 65 or older, individuals with compromised immune systems, and individuals that have serious chronic medical conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and lung disease. And we said, you're part of a vulnerable group, but we care about you, and we don't want you to get sick as part of being an essential worker and stuff. So we automatically notified them that they could be excused from any work that they would have to do if they had to report to work. And we've had a couple of employees that have taken advantage of that as well. And then the other thing we did is working with CSEA in particular, we came up with a list of essential services that had to be done and identified some essential classifications that needed to be brought in to do those essential services, and that became the kind of the backbone for our MOU, which I'll talk about in a second. The other thing that we did is, in preparation of not knowing what was going to happen, is we notified all of our employees across the board that they were essential service. They were part of the essential service workforce, and this also happened just after this happened in close proximity to the governor's notification that only essential service workforce employees would be able to leave their homes. And so they were all provided with a memo that they could keep with them, that if they were out and about or continue to be out because they have to come to work to provide that essential service, that they're identified as part of that essential service workforce. So throughout this entire process, we've been working with all of our bargaining units, making sure that we're all on the same page together with this. It's one of those, and it's been a really, I think, a real positive experience, because we have been working closely with our bargaining units as opposed to working against our bargaining units. We're all coming together on the same page with that. And that leads us to the MOUs that we had and that the board had adopted. So, Anna, if you go to the next slide. Yeah. So we developed two memorandum of understanding, and essentially they're based on the needs of the employee groups, and the needs of our employee groups are very different. So the very first one we did was actually approved on March 17th. So a day after the first day of our entire school closure. It just shows the collaborative relationship we have with CSEA, that we developed a memorandum of understanding. At the time, we anticipated, gosh, this will be good for the end of April. But as you heard earlier, we're coming back to the table on Friday to continue the negotiations, the extension of that MOU, because we now know that this is obviously far beyond the end of April. But some of the things that the MOU provided for our employees, particularly I'll begin with classified. So our classified employees, we talked about the fact that the reason that we were doing it is because of the importance of ensuring that we have safe facilities and operations, and that we establish prudent measures to prevent district employees, students, their families, and others from being exposed to COVID-19. And then also to ensure our employees of what they're doing. So some of the things that the MOU for our classified employees does is it provides information to employees on the public health. We provided information to our employees, classified employees, on public health measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And this was, again, at the very early stages of school closures. We ensured employees would not suffer any loss as a result of this. So their pay would remain the same and their benefits would remain the same throughout the closure. If employees had their time off scheduled for spring break, they were allowed to continue to take that time off for spring break. And we've been flexible with that, because at the time we thought everything would be back open by spring break, and obviously it wasn't. So employees were told that they needed to be available during their regular working days, during their regular working hours, and many of them would need to provide remote services to the district. And it's been amazing to see how many of them have, and the services that they're providing remotely, to continue to make sure that we continue to be a well-running organization. And I can speak specifically about the HR staff. My HR staff is still working tirelessly from home to make sure that we're staying on top of all of our schedules and all of our deadlines, and we're doing recruiting, we're offering transfers, all that kind of stuff that we would normally do. Intent to return notices have gone out, letters of reasonable assurance have gone out, all those kinds of things that are all happening remotely now as opposed to happening here in the office, which has been, and that's just one small example of what we're seeing district-wide. We were, again, just like we mentioned at the beginning, that what folded into the MOU is that we wanted to make sure our classified employees were available during the normal work days, that were checking their emails frequently. If they were quarantined because of COVID-19, that was paid leave, that they didn't have to go into their accumulated sick leave for that. Vulnerable populations were exempt from learning. That the essential services we identified were the grab-and-go meals, payroll, payments to our business partners, maintenance of our schools and facilities. We made sure, one of the things that we had talked about this a little bit, we had talked about premium pay for employees that were required to report in, and we agreed that one of the things we would do is develop a rotating schedule so not everyone had to report in, that everyone kind of, rather than just one small group having to do the work, that everyone kind of chipped in and helped out, because everyone continued to be paid and continued to receive their benefits. So it was a way of making sure that kind of we're all having to go through something difficult together, but everyone is carrying their fair share of that. And that's been really positive for our employees. They've been doing a great job with that. We adjusted our shifts, and we did that to make sure that no one was having to work late evenings by themselves or at sites by themselves. So everyone that was coming in for the essential work was coming in during the day. And then at the time, we had hoped to implement a team cleaning process. And Art will talk about that, I know, coming up a little bit later, and what that was about. But after we did that, like Judy mentioned before, we started having more and more restrictions from Riverside County University Public Health. And one of the things that in working with CSEA that we've talked about as a concern is being able to maintain social distancing while we're still doing team cleaning. And you can imagine if you're having to have two people pick up a really heavy item or whatever, those two individuals might not be able to be, at least 6 feet apart from one another and stuff. So there were just some things that kind of were hiccups along the way that we continue to work on with our bargaining unit. And then later in the month, we developed an MOU with our Teachers Association. And the difference is that by that time in the process, we knew that we were going to have to initiate distance learning. We knew that we were going to have to, prior to that, we were doing enrichment, but then we were moving on into actual instruction with our students. And so we talked about the impacts that would have on our certificated employees. And so some of the things we did with certificated, similar to classified, is we had provisions in there as they relate to making sure that they were held harmless on their pay and benefits. We wanted to make sure that one of the key phrases that we talked about, and PSEA was actually really good about this, because we said to our teachers, hey, listen, we want you guys to be flexible with our students, because students and families are going through a really unique time right now. We all are. We want you to be flexible. And PSEA said loud and clear to us, we will totally do that, but district, we also want you to be flexible with us. And so that's kind of the mantra that we've had in HR, is flexibility, and not just HR, I think all throughout the district. Like, we just need to be flexible in this period of time, because every single day brings something brand new. And so that was kind of what we did as we developed this MOU, is talked about flexibility. So we wanted our employees to check their emails regularly, be available during their work days, be sensitive as it relates to grading for students, because everyone's different. Accessibility that our students have is very different. The supports that different students have at home is very different. So an important thing as we talked about this is the priority of providing equity to our students didn't go away because of distance learning. We kept that at the forefront of what we were doing. We wanted to make sure that whatever we did, we looked at the needs of all of our students and made sure that we continue to provide quality service to those students. So we talked about providing time for preparing for distance learning. So we didn't push it out immediately when the MOU was done. We actually allowed our teachers to prepare for that, get training if they needed to. We worked with our IT department to make sure that they had the equipment that they needed. And then we rolled out distance learning right after our spring break. We talked about the platforms that they utilized, so that way we would standardize what it was. We continued to provide collaboration time for our teachers, because they're continuing to collaborate on a weekly basis as we provide distance learning opportunities for our kids. We wanted to make sure that our counselors were still providing services to our students even as we were going through this, but having flexibility in how they provided services. Evaluation was a big thing that we talked to both bargaining units about, and it was handled differently based on how they are. But in the case of our certificated bargaining unit, all of our observations for certificated employees were actually coincidentally due right about the time that we went on break. And so there was a natural progression to continue the evaluation process with certificated employees. Where with classified employees, there's a window of evaluation period that starts in March and goes until June. And so we're addressing the classified evaluation on a case-by-case basis, a little bit different than certificated. We also wanted our employees to maintain professional standards. That was included in conduct. That was included in the MOU and something we talked about. And our teachers have done an amazing job with that, as well as our classified employees. We included provisions for the temporary sick leave policy in that MOU. And again, we maintained flexibility and fluidity throughout the process. And so unlike the MOU with the teachers, classified employees with CSEA, the Teachers Association, we had known by that time that there was a high likelihood that schools were going to be closed until the end of the year. So when we developed that MOU, we did it through the end of the school year, through the end of June. And so right now we're still functioning under that. If things change, then we'll have to go back to the table with our Teachers Association as well. So if you can go to the next page, next slide, thanks. So as I mentioned in my first slide, we started with, this is looking at a lens from about caring for our employees, and we continue to care for our employees. So one of the things that we're doing now is we have regular ongoing problem solving with both of our bargaining units. In fact, right before this meeting, I was on the phone with PSCA, and I spent a big chunk of the day on Friday with our CSCA group, and it's just ongoing collaboration, ongoing talking. One of the things that came out earlier in the month too was the framework for labor management collaboration, and that was put out by the California School Boards Association, AXA, CTA, CSTA, a number of groups throughout the state that all contributed to that. And it was really interesting because what that particular document indicated is it basically said these are the things that school districts should be working on together and negotiating with their bargaining units. And interestingly, it basically hit every item that we had already accomplished within both of our MOUs. So we also continue to work with individual employees, and on a regular basis, we get inquiries from individual employees or issues that come up with individual employees, and we're handling it on a daily basis with our employees in terms of assisting them as we continue to progress through this school closure. As we've mentioned several times now, we are going to be back at the table on Friday with CSDA to talk about the extension of the current MOU, and there may be some other things that CSDA wants to talk about related to that. We'll continue to talk to them about. And then most importantly, and one of the things, and Judy had talked about this when she had talked about her introduction, but we're continuing to adhere to or exceeding recommendations from the CDC and the Riverside County University Public Health recommendations in terms of meeting the needs of our employees. And then the other thing we're doing is we're also in the human resources world, we're also really paying attention closely to what we're seeing both at the state and federal level as it relates to employee rights and employee issues. And so some of the examples of that include both the Department of Industrial Relation recommendations as it relates to addressing COVID-19, Department of Fair Employment and Housing recommendations also related to handling the virus. And then we look carefully at OSHA and what OSHA has to say about our employees. And right now, OSHA has identified our employees as those employees that are reporting to sites, and we're talking about our nutrition services assistants that are out there, our custodians that are helping, administrators that are at the site, people that are coming in to help out in our tech staff, people that are helping out at central office, clerical staff and stuff like that, are still identified as either low or medium exposure risk to attaining the virus, which is really important to us because we want to minimize everything we can to put our employees in harm's way, because a lot of our employees are really scared right now and still remain scared in terms of this, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reassure them of the fact that that they're going to be okay. And OSHA the difference between the low and the medium exposure risk is compared to what they refer to as a high or a very high exposure risk. And you can imagine that very high are individuals that are working in public health and things like that. So sorry for taking too much time. I think I was running through it, but I wanted to update you on what HR has been doing to help take care for our employees.
Hey, well, good afternoon. I'll jump in here. I want to say good afternoon, President Stafford and the board, as we kind of take you through what we've done in regards to distance learning since our previous meeting. I believe it was March 10th when we had this discussion. At that particular time, we weren't talking about distance learning. We were talking about enrichment activities. And I believe the entire county and all the different schools were talking about enrichment activities because there were very specific concerns in regards to students that were receiving services in special education. And if we could we could actually meet those mandates in a format in regards to distance learning. And so what I have here before you is just kind of the twists and turns that we've taken over the past few weeks and few months in regards to this transition to distance learning from enrichment activities. And that's not just for our district, but that's for all the districts in the county as well, and then throughout the state. And so as of March 12th, there was some guidance that was released specifically from the Department of Education that stated that if any services that we provide for a general ed student in regards to distance learning, we had to provide those same services for our students with disabilities. And so part of that made it very clear to all districts at this particular time, we could not, that IDEA, which is kind of the law that governs how we support our students who are receiving special education services, it appeared like a barrier to provide those services. So everyone agreed it was going to be enrichment activities. Now, not too long after that, March 17th, I think prior to that, Governor Newsom came out and was very specific that he expected all schools to provide distance learning. Not too long after that, the California Department of Education, they came out as well and said that school districts, county offices of education, charter schools, all agencies should immediately begin developing a plan for distance learning for their students. And so that was an expectation set forth by the state. Not too long after that, on March 20th, special education guidance came out once again from California Department of Education that says until and unless ultimately the federal government provides flexibility under federal law, that we should do our best to adhering to IDEA requirements, including federally mandated timelines to the maximum extent possible. So there were still concerns that we were still under those requirements as it relates to supporting our students who are receiving special ed services. But something interesting happening on March 20th, actually on March 21st. It's interesting, that was a Saturday. So normally new guidance doesn't come out on a Saturday, but that guidance came out Saturday, which was encouraging. That the Office of Civil Rights submitted a supplemental fact sheet to the release that happened on March 12th that specifically said that the department understands that during this national emergency, schools may not be able to provide all services in the same manner they typically provided, and that federal law will allow flexibility during a national emergency in regards to how we service our students who are receiving special education services. And so that quickly transitioned not just our district, but all districts around us, and really gave us kind of the bridge to start moving toward distance learning. And then April 1st, one of the concepts we were all clear about, that we wanted to provide some specific guidance to all of our schools in regards to grading, but we needed a little more support from the state in regards to grading. And that's when the California Department of Education released guidance as it related to seniors and grading to help us get that work done. And a statement came out from our State Board of Education President, Linda Darling-Hammond, who stated new guidance illustrates how students can and should be held harmless in grading and also have their work in distance learning be acknowledged and count toward improving their grading. So that was the work that came out from the county, from CDE. In addition to that, they said that if seniors are currently on track to graduate, those seniors should graduate. So that led us immediately to begin having conversations. I want to thank the work that Kirk accomplished with the union, with our union, PSEA in particular, because we kind of worked together to really come to some understanding around grading. And since then, we've kind of pushed out some grading guidelines for the district. But that road represents kind of the twists and turns that we've taken over the past few weeks in moving to distance learning. If we can go to the next slide. Since then, we've kind of been working together as a team. And so specific steps that we've taken on March 23rd, you see the first step we took, we developed a plan specifically to transition to distance learning. And so that information went out to parents as well as teachers, just informing them that we basically staged different phases that we went out. The initial phase was the training, preparation, and planning phase. And so we worked with teams and work with them in terms of getting prepared for this. But then also behind the scenes, there was a lot of support provided in terms of training and support. In addition to that, on April 3rd, we started developing grading guidelines and sending that information out to just all our staff members in regards to what our expectations were or what our guidelines were, lining up specifically with what the California Department of Education stated, that the goal is to do no harm to where kids were at currently on March 13th when the school closure took place, so that grades should not drop below that March 13 grade. However, that our current opportunities that we're providing through distance learning would allow for students to improve their grades. And so that's the grading guidelines that went out. April 7th, we had a distance learning website. We worked together to get a website up that provides a lot of the information that our parents need. We sent a distance learning survey home on April 10th just to get information from families in regards to their access to the internet. In addition to that, we also, April 14th, just recently, thanks to Pupil Services, they'll go through that in just a minute, just some of the social emotional supports that we provided as well, realizing that families are at home going through a lot of different challenges, and we wanted to make sure we consider the needs of our kids, not just academically, but also social emotionally and what their needs are. And then we also developed a distance learning FAQs in regards to the instructional side of the work. And so we have links there for you as well that really develop that information to provide information out to our teachers. And so what we want to do today is have each one of our directors that kind of led this work to check in regards to what's taking place and kind of inform you in regards to how things are going out there. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Julie Zero, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
All right, good afternoon. I'm excited to kind of share some of the processes that we've done as far as putting together the distance learning process. I will say that probably our biggest strength has been the communication and collaboration that we've had with our teachers. And I think that that's been set forth by HR and the work that they've done, as well as the collaboration with the executive board, Dr. Newman and Kurt, kind of setting us up for success in what that distance learning process looks like. I think where we really lucked out is we started having conversations about what it would look like if the district had to shut down and there was a school closure. And we started those conversations prior to March 13th. And so I think that helped us get ahead of the game, that we actually started having conversations with our instructional coaches, both at the site and the district level prior to the closure, where we started developing resource guides for our teachers to help prep them for what it would look like if they had to move in that direction of distance learning. And so they were very well prepared. The day before, so March 12th, we had a team meeting with all of the instructional coaches from the district, including the technology coaches, to work on those instructional tools for our teachers. And they were able to actually take those tools on Friday during the collaboration time to start some of those discussions. And so some of the teachers had already kind of began some conversations with their students as far as what to prepare for. And so as we kind of went through that process, as Dr. Newman shared, it was kind of like a roller coaster, lots of bends in the road as far as what that would look like. Originally thinking we were going to distance learning and then coming back to some enrichment activities prior to spring break. And so we did a lot of work with our teams. And I think where we've seen the success comes from the collaboration with the different groups. So our instructional coaches, we check in on a bi-weekly basis. And those instructional coaches are working with their site teams. And you'll see this graphic kind of shows you how the regular conversations are really taking place on a regular basis. And so the instructional coaches are working regularly with the site teams to ensure that they're getting the support that they need through this process. We also have done a good job of working with the principal teams, meeting with them at least once a week, if not twice a week, to make sure that the communication is clear to the site level admin. And then their leadership teams, they're meeting on a weekly basis at the school sites with their leadership teams, which kind of helps prepare them for their site PLC teams in communicating some of those that information, the tools and the resources available. And as we were having these conversations, we wanted to make sure that everybody is sharing the load of the work, not making sure that the teachers didn't feel like they were on their own and having to develop everything on their own. And that's where it really came to be really important that the coaches were working with the teachers in their PLC groups, as well as working with our subject area teams and checking in with each of our content areas to make sure that there was support and understanding of what some of the struggles might be for each of the different groups. And so we've been lucky to have a lot of really great resources and platforms to be able to operate and support our teachers. So a lot of great people really having their hands in the work, and that's something to be proud of, that they're behind the scenes reaching out and talking to our teachers on a regular basis. Next slide, please. And then when we look at distance learning, we really encourage teachers to make sure that they were using some learning management system we didn't dictate which learning management system it would be that they would use, but Canvas and Google Classroom have been the two main platforms that all of our teachers have been trained on during our PD days, as well as some additional training once we started moving in this direction. Our tech TOSAs put out some trainings to help support the teachers as well, so that they were able to get their assignments, any type of instruction up on an electronic platform. So based on the MOU, after we came back from spring break, the requirement that we've asked teachers to do is post weekly assignments, to have those posted by 11:59 on Sunday night, so that students come Monday morning have an opportunity to work on assignments to only improve their grades. So again, like Dr. Newman said, doing no harm to their grades. So providing opportunities for those grades to improve. And then having flexible learning opportunities. I think that was really important for us, is to not dictate one specific form of instruction, but allowing teachers to have some autonomy, but also encouraging them to work with their PLC teams so that they were sharing the workload as far as what kind of opportunities they were providing for students. And so we've heard some really awesome strategies that teachers have been using. They're using multiple platforms. We have a platform for most of our core content areas. So specifically, like Pearson is our English and math platforms. They provide a lot of online resource tools that help students kind of navigate some of the curriculum without having that one-on-one or that classroom experience. Also, teachers have been really great about coming up with kind of a smattering of opportunities that students actually get a choice. So they don't necessarily have to do every assignment that the teacher posts, but they might post 15 different opportunities for students, and those students would have the opportunity to choose 5 of those activities. So it might be something from the Pearson platform, it might be something from Newsella, it might be another opportunity that the teacher is given some instructions on how to partake in that. So I think that that's been good for both the students and for the teachers to have that flexibility. Really kind of adapting to the situation that we're in, and helping students and teachers feel comfortable with those different activities that they're providing. We also created a recommended student schedule to support our families. And this is just kind of to help guide the families on how much time students should be spending on their assignments each day, and kind of a recommendation of what they should be spending time on by subject matter. That way they're getting through their activities by the end of the week. And then we've asked the teachers to give ongoing feedback to the students. So whether that's through a written format or through grades, that's encouraged, that they're responding to our students within a reasonable amount of time. Through the process of developing the activities, we've asked them to keep in mind different opportunities to support our students that are on IEPs and 504 plans. With that being said, they've been encouraged to work with the case carriers for the students to ensure that they're getting some additional support if needed. And then the additional information you'll see is the tools and resources. This is just a guide that has the different platforms that are available for teachers to use. We've been really lucky to have some of our publishers open access, not just to the content areas that we currently have an adoption for, but also opening them up to other content areas. Specifically, like Pearson has opened it up for social science. Our Discovery platform, which we're in the process of working with for our middle school science, they've opened up every access to all grade levels and all content areas that are available through that publishing company. And so it's provided lots and lots of different resources for teachers to pull from to provide this distance learning process, which is something that's new for all of us, to go from, the everyday classroom experience to distance learning in a matter of basically overnight. I think our teachers have done an amazing job. And I think that the strength has really been in the collaboration and the communication that we've had as a whole district team. It's really helped make a lot of our processes move a lot smoother. And I hear this not just from colleagues of mine, but from teachers and staff members from different districts that have not had such a great experience with this transition. So it's a kudos to our entire team. The next slide, please. And so in addition to the distance learning process, I think one of the things that I thought about right away as we kind of moved into this, and I think everybody's experienced this is the conversation about our seniors and some of the challenges that they're experiencing now, missing out on a lot of different experiences with the senior activities. But some things that were really important for us to make sure that our students stayed on track and had the support that they needed was that post-secondary plan and that transition into the next steps in their lives, as well as the upcoming AP testing. The College Board has been amazing as far as coming up with a doable, reasonable plan for our students to take the AP test, which is something that we were all concerned about them not having an opportunity to test due to the school closures, but they've made some really good adjustments to help allow our students to take those AP tests. And so the last couple of weeks, we've been really working on communication with our AP students and ensuring that they know what each of those tests that they're taking look like and how they can prepare for that. Attached, you'll see that there's a sample letter that went home to all students taking AP exams, and this goes over to a lot of detail of what is expected with the AP testing, what the process looks like. It also gives them the schedule of what tests that they're registered for and what time the test is. So everything is included in the letter to make sure that they have all the information needed to take the test. And we're also working with RCOE to ensure if there's any need for hotspots for students to be able to take the test. They're also helping support that process for us as well. And then looking at our students that have been accepted to four-year colleges, particularly the UC and the CSU, we've been reaching out and making sure that those students have the support that they need to make the right decisions based on their FAFSA and web grant support that they've been awarded, as well as where their acceptance have been. So one of the things that we put together is the College and Career Readiness Support Form, and this is for personalized assistance for our students. We sent this out, I believe this was sent out the first week of the closure. We had developed this to reach out to students, particularly seniors, to make sure that they could request any assistance that they might need for their post-secondary plan. So this form is generated and automatically submitted to our college and career counselors that then reach out to those individual students to help with those individualized questions. And so those things have ranged from accepting their web grants with their FAFSA to submitting their intent to register for next year of which college they're going to, matriculation to MSJC or any other community college. And so I think that we've really done a good job of reaching out to our senior students to ensure that they're getting the necessary support for their post-secondary plans. So kudos to our counseling team for putting that together in a very efficient manner. So from the instructional perspective, that's what I have for you all today. I'm gonna now hand it off to Mr. Bruff, who's gonna talk to you a little bit about social emotional support for our students.
Good afternoon to the board. Thanks for giving us this opportunity. Dr. Newman, as our leader, has really stressed upon us through this whole experience that we need to not just make sure kids get academic support, but are we being, cognizant of the difficulties families are going through? And you see before you it says 3 phases, but that's really in terms of how we reached out to counselors. We want you to know that all of these phases are kind of happening simultaneously. But of course, immediately returning from spring break, we wanted to begin working to reach out to any student on a 504 plan, because as Dr. Newman said, as we got information from the federal government, from the state, all those IDEA rules apply to special ed, and Mr. Al-Zubaydi will talk about that in a minute, but they also, really apply to all of our 504 students. We also wanted to bring it to the forefront to check on any student that had a previous safety plan, students that had suicide plans previously or ideation, or any kind of dangerous behaviors that counselors, we have such amazing counselors, they're working to reach out to those kids that they're on their radar for dangerous behaviors. Then this we reached a little deeper. I spoke to you last week about students that were going through drug counseling or anger management. Well, those classes that were being so effective, were abrupted. So we're trying to do personal outreach to those students. So our counselors are working very hard every day from home to work with those students. And then the next tier would, of course, be our foster youth. And we'll start reaching out to them very shortly to make sure that their needs are being met. We will also probably add to this list McKinney-Vento students, but our homeless students. And of course, the fear is that many of our students and families may find themselves in that situation now. So as those needs arise, we'll also have to support them through that. So that was initial any student at risk. Phase 2 was kind of talking about ongoing counselor support, that we would want to help students engage emotionally who struggle emotionally with anything. And then, as Ms. Zero said, they're particularly cognizant of helping students who are 12th graders and at risk of not graduating. This is always a big push. And whether we're home or remote or via video or telephone, we want to make sure no senior falls through the cracks. So the team has been working very hard through that. And then, of course, the next tier would be to look at juniors and make sure we're setting them up for success. And then the last phase is, summer school. That's still up in the air. I think there was some information out today, perhaps. But Ms. Zero has really been working with counselors on registering and prepping for next year. So all three of those things are kind of happening simultaneously, but we want to always keep our students' mental and physical wellness at the forefront, as well as their academic wellness. Next slide, please, Ms. Fetzner. We also we have up on the website that I want to thank Mark Sennett and Diane Martin and that team that has done such phenomenal work there. We listed lots of resources for mental health, emergency mental health, but then we wanted to transition this week to some emotional support, just kind of keeping people buoyant, we know that they're stuck at home and they're probably driving each other crazy with their brothers and sisters, their dads, their moms. Everybody's in close quarters. So how could we assist them through just that mental buoyancy? And we've got 3 things that they can access. There's the counselor mental health tip of the day that will begin tomorrow. And we met with our counselors, and each counseling team has taken over a week. And they're going to offer a tip of the day, something to help keep kids up and focused. We've worked with Thriving University. They're a group led by Dr. Hood, who has a doctorate in emotional wellness. And there's this thing called Taking Time to Breathe, where students are reflective, and it gives them a tool to kind of make it through being trapped in your house. And then, of course, we've talked to you before about Ripple Effects, which has been an online counseling resource they've had all year, but we wanted to give kids access to that as well. So we just want you to know how worried we are about our families. We know that you represent your constituencies and you're worried about them as well. And we want you to know we're going to give them every resource possible to manage things in the best possible way. So thank you very much. I'll hand it over to my colleague for special ed.
You got your mic, Emil?
Sorry, I was so excited to get started. I just jumped right in. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruff. As Dr. Newman had pointed out earlier, special education has been really a whirlwind in regards to trying to figure out how are we going to support our students, how are we going to get them the access that they need and deserve. And so right from the get-go, on March 20th, we sent out a prior written notice. We actually mailed out 1,434 letters. Every special ed student received a letter notifying them of our intent, that we're here for you, and that we're going to be doing enrichment support services. And then that's when a lot of the information came from the feds, the state, and then from our own SELPA in regards to information that was just pouring in regards to, should we hold IEP meetings? Should we not hold IEP meetings? Should we offer special education services? Should we not offer special education services? And I think Dr. Newman would attest, I think he and I were on the phone almost either every morning or every evening as information was developing. That left us with looking at March 27th, where we communicated our intent to do distance learning, and that we were not holding IEP meetings at that point, because the information that we received from our own SELPA was be cautious in regards to holding IEP meetings. And that left a very interesting trail in regards to our attorney that advised us that I caution you in not holding IEP meetings, but let's wait and see what comes out from the webinar that was set up from the California Department of Education on April 2nd. And you'll see I left those links on there for you so you can access those yourself. April 2nd was the game changer for special education. And so April 2nd, Los Angeles Unified and Humboldt County came on board and said, look, we are holding IEP meetings, we're doing distance learning, we're meeting with families. And the expectation at that point, after that meeting, after that webinar, I'm sorry, was that districts, you must hold IEP meetings and you must do distance learning. So that left us on April 10th, after discussing with our legal counsel, where do we go? What do we do? And because we want to make sure that we're doing right by our students, right by our families, right by our staff. And so that led us to then at that point, shifting the entire course of action to now holding IEP meetings. Next slide, please. So that resulted in me contacting other directors in the region. And all of a sudden, one director contacted me, another director contacted me. And after we know it, I want to say about 20 directors formed their own coalition, if you will, outside of the SELPA meeting to talk about what we're doing, what's in our best interest for students, and minimizing this notion of comp ed services that's going to come into play at some point when we do return from school, because you're going to have parents that are going to say, you didn't provide the offer of FAPE I stipulated on my child's IEP, when in fact, as going through what Dr. Newman pointed out, to the maximum extent possible, we in fact are. And so what we did was, instead of holding amendment meetings to transition our service from in the classroom to in the home setting, we provided a modified version of prior written notice. And in that prior written notice, it notifies our intent to provide distance learning and to provide those supports and services. So we met with all of our related service providers, our school psychologists, our speech pathologists, our OTs, our PTs, and we drafted that. We changed that ship in terms of making sure that everyone had sites, the Google Sites up and running before the week of the 13th, that we made sure that we had services and supports ready to go, that we would do distance learning platforming, working with the union in terms of making sure that we send emails, that we follow up with phone calls, and as a last resort, use the video conferencing as a tool for our students in terms of connecting and making sure that they're understanding the materials. On April 17th, we put out special education guidance. We put out a paraprofessional memo. We were working collaboratively with both Jason and Josh in regards to those aspects. I think we made a concerted effort to make sure that we had our students in mind, our staff in mind, and our families in mind as we move forward. That being said, we also send out our extended school year, and so we're trucking forward and moving forward with that piece. We're looking at for next year, making sure that when we come back, because the one thing that the state and the feds all agreed on was that our initial assessments could be put on pause until we return, and our triennial assessments could be on pause as well. However, when we return, we're going to have 30 days to complete all those assessments and hold those IEP meetings. In addition to that, we want to move forward with focusing on our C's classrooms. We're looking at opening up a behavioral classroom on every site. Currently, we have a self-contained behavioral classroom at Paloma and Tennessee. Our goal is to have one at Perris High School as well as at Heritage High School as well. And then when Liberty opens, our hope is to open one at Liberty as well. So next, I believe that is it on my end. Dr. Newman, I'm going to get it right back to you, sir.
No, sounds good. And so I think as we close out, just want to say that this was really, this has been complex work, and we've been really working together. And as we talk about the importance of flexibility, not just flexibility, I would add in just the collaboration with our teachers and with our departments. I know behind the scenes, also our tech department and the support that they provided, because as we moved forward with distance learning in terms of the educational requirements, I know Joe and his team was behind the scenes in terms of the tech piece supporting us. And so at this time, we're going to hand it over to him to kind of take us into that.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. There's a saying that I say is that nobody likes to know how the sausage is made. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are happening, but it's not as glamorous. So thank you, Board President Stafford, School Board, Superintendent, and Cabinet for all your work. I will not repeat all the timelines and bullet points that were listed previously, but kind of take this at a little different angle. There's a quote by Chris Lehman who says that technology should be ubiquitous, it should be necessary, and it should be invisible. And what that sort of means is that everything should just work, right? The systems in place, everything should just work. We shouldn't make a big celebration with trumpets when our kids break out the Chromebook. It should be a part of the natural day and a part of how they do business. So this part of the presentation for technology, I want to talk to you about some of the strengths of Perris Union High School District. I want to give you some timeline points that, kind of prior to closure, high points with ed tech and timeline with tech, and then some statistics. And then I also want to talk about what makes PUHSD unique. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. You've seen this before. I'm talking about our desired outcomes, and I can tell you that we got to where we are at this point of our strength of distance learning because we established these desired outcomes prior to 2013 and revealed those in August of 2013. And the opportunity for 24/7 learning, which is obviously, plays big into our distance learning practices, that we're providing 21st century school skills and so on and so forth. I always really capitalize on the last bullet point about equitable access to previously underserved populations. And during this distance learning foray that all these school districts are going into, equity has been a huge topic. Equity of access, equity of if teachers are assigning homework, if there's a parent at home that can help. So luckily for us, since we've been doing Scholar Plus since 2013, we've ironed out a lot of those equity issues, but not all of them, and there still is a divide there. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. So some of the strengths of Perris Union High School District, and I want to thank Board Member Nellisons for his kind words at the board meeting last time, where he talked about past board decisions. Our school board has been making future-ready school board decisions, and you continue to do so in the area of technology. So I'd like to thank past school board members. I'd like to thank board members now that are making future-ready decisions, and it's a strength. Our department has built a strong infrastructure over the years. There's systems in place on how we communicate with each other that make us strong and agile. The school board has made an investment in people and systems, not just technology, not just Chromebooks. Anybody can go out and buy a Chromebook. That doesn't mean they're going to learn. But the district has made an investment in people, and we appreciate you for that, and in systems. And my department has a solid strategic planning and forecasting background. If you remember, in a lot of board presentations, I talk about forecasting, and we're continually forecasting right now. And we'll go into a little bit of detail about that. We talked about flexibility, and flexibility is awesome, but we also need to be agile and responsive. So when a problem comes up, we're able to pivot. And there's a culture of sharing and innovation in this district that we've relied on heavily. We've relied on that heavily, and it's been pretty awesome. And also, when you're in the thick of it, you need a distributed leadership and decision-making model where the technology coaches and the techs can make those decisions at the lowest possible level to get resources to students and staff. And so those are some of the strengths that I feel has gotten us this far. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. In case you don't know, and the other timelines on the presentation talked about when we first posted it on the website, but what I wanted you to know, that was on February 11th, myself and the tech coaches had a regular scheduled meeting, but the big topic was, what is the world going to look like if this comes over here to the United States? And out of that meeting, we started pulling together resources for distance learning essentials. And what are the essential things that teachers and students are going to need? And I'll explain what we did on that. And then it became a topic at that February Educational Technology Council meeting. And so I would say that we jumped in on February 11th. And one of the interesting things that we did between February 11th and February 28th is that we used systems in place that we already have of a Chromebook checkup for testing. All the campuses do Chromebook checkup for testing. And so what we did was we stepped up on that, not to alarm people, but we made a concerted effort and duplicated our efforts to meet students where they were on campus. This is prior before closing, and make sure that students have a device. And in doing so, we did not have a run on the need for devices because all our kids had devices. Not all of them, but most of them had the devices. So we were working behind the scenes, during that time period. I believe there was a holiday after the 28th, so that's probably where it cut off there. We worked on completing our distance learning essentials. And what that was with the technology coaches was, how can we meet teachers where they are? Do teachers have the basic requisite knowledge on how to email their students, how to email a distribution group, how to join Google Classroom, how to create a Google Classroom. And so the coaches prior to that were meeting teachers in their classrooms and supporting them, but also with the new bent on, how are you doing with these processes? On March 10th, we held Educational Technology Council online. We had not, schools were not closed until the 13th, but we hosted those online. And then, as Ms. Zerold mentioned, on 3/12, we reviewed our distance learning essentials with student services. Those are some of the points prior to that. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. So some of the high points was that the tech coaches created an Educational Technology Council resource page, and this is a launch point for anything and everything. And so what the tech coaches do there is anytime anybody asks them a question or there's a professional development module, this is the location that they put it. So they're not just doing one-off PD, they're actually warehousing all their resources there. And this was a focused professional development. I have been meeting with them probably daily or every other day. And I'm sure they don't want to meet with me daily. And so we meet regularly to make sure that we calibrate on what the teachers need. The tech coaches have been integral a part of all those meetings. We're deeply entrenched in those meetings, and that's some of the high points. Little shout out, we loaned MSJC 50 Chromebooks to keep their students up and running in this distance learning scenario. And thanks to Superintendent Bennett for working with us and the college to get that done. We've done extensive short-term, long-term strategic planning that combine with the desired outcomes. Still to this day, we're defining our challenges, we're clarifying options, and we're building scenarios. So a lot of the things that you see that's ready for prime time, that might be the third or fourth phase. You might think, oh, that's interesting, it went so well. But we've developed those scenarios and built them and tried them out. And when they failed, we tried again. And that's how we're able to be so successful. And to piggyback off what Dr. Newman said and what Bob had mentioned and Kirk also, our tech coaches being there for emotional support. They've established virtual coffee talks. In case you don't know, they're pretty exciting. They have trivia nights where staff just gets on a Google Hangout and they play trivia. And the tech coaches have created appointment slots where anybody can book time with them and work through things. So there's been some pretty awesome developments on that. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. On the tech side, as I mentioned, on 2/11, we accelerated our Chromebook checkups. We weren't closed yet, but we accelerated checkups on Chromebooks to make sure kids were on the right page. We also started on 2/14, we started redirecting resources behind the scene. We started looking at inventory, we started looking at stock, we started looking at laptops and older MacBook Airs that we had. And we started behind the scenes provisioning them in anticipation of anything. And we created an assembly line of techs learning how to do that. On the 14th, we were already working. And one of the things I can tell you about the techs, they're getting to learn more about my philosophy of work. And one of the things that I talk to them about is don't work. I want you to design work. So while they're provisioning laptops, anybody can provision it and they can just say, click here, click there, and they prepare it to go. But I want them to design the workflow so that anybody could take over when they're done. And they've done really good about designing those workflows, and then I can step away. We've been collaborating with the tech coaches and staff on equipment. So prior to closures, we were reaching out to people. We had some converts over to MacBooks, teachers that swore they would never switch. And on 2/24, we got about 5 more that said, I want to switch permanently, I'm good to go. And we were able to do that through the support of our tech coaches and our techs. On the 16th, as Kirk mentioned, our essential employee critical infrastructure schedule. The 16th was a Monday, I believe. And on that Monday, of course, I was at work, and my network engineer and my programmer analyst were at work on that day. It was important that they were here that day to make sure that everything is up and running, that our our switchgear, our servers. We had to do some behind the scenes programming to make a model that was dependent on people going to school and being at a campus available offline. We didn't have to do much, but we had to do some. And I won't go into too many details on that because that would be dangerous to our infrastructure if I shared publicly on the web some of the things that we did for data privacy and security. We're not going to reveal that stuff. We also started doing website redirects. We put like 4 or 5 buttons on the main page because we were noticing that people wanted to go to see about nutrition services and distance learning, which was previously enrichment. And things that people wanted to see, we just put these big bold buttons. It was down and dirty on the main page so that people were clicking on them and they were getting that important information right to the people. On March 16th, the FCC created a pledge, and that pledge was to challenge broadband providers to do three main things. And those three main things were to not turn off people's Wi-Fi or broadband because of the lack of able to pay, to not do that, to also limit data caps because now everybody's at home. And many providers did that. But the last part of that FCC pledge was to provide free access to families with K-12 children, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their paycheck. And they were not to charge for installation, and they were not to charge for a couple months. I won't name only one provider in the area that has met all those three tenets, but I can tell you that I was cajoling every single one of the providers in our areas about, have you signed on the pledge, and are you going to provide free broadband for a given period of time? And that's extremely important. And then the last sort of technology bullet point was, we, as you know, board, we held a hybrid board meeting on 3/18, and that was before the more restrictive county health guidelines that came in. And then on 4/15, we held a virtual board meeting. And of course, we're holding one now. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. So the high points of technology, we created tech safety plans and procedures. As some of you may know, I have a career changer, so I came from demolition and heavy equipment prior to this job. I was an English teacher also, but we had created some really good technology plans, and we have morning technology meetings. And some of the things we covered is, if you haven't been to my office, you might want to poke your head in there to know that you need to go through procedures to get in here. You need to sanitize, you need to leave your personal belongings at a certain table. If we're going to work on your equipment, you need to set it at that table and you need to sanitize it. And then there's another station before you get through. We don't take their temperature. We don't have any scanners like the airport. They're on order. Approve the PO, everybody. But we've established positions at the campus to help the library media techs work with students to come and get Chromebooks on how they can do that in the most secure manner. And I'm extremely proud of that. And I've also talked with the techs that they are to report any safety inconsistencies at any moment. They need to let us know, and they've done a good job, and we've redirected. Just so you know, self-harm alerts, I remember one of the board members asked about self-harm alerts. They're still on. Our ecosystem, we're able to see where kids are reaching out. There was a kid reaching out for help on Sunday, and I can tell you that Mark Harrell took care of that with the family, and we appreciate his work on that. We've also been able to reallocate MacBook and Chromebook inventory because we've built inventory here to deploy. And if we didn't have those reserves, we would have been in a bind, and I'll talk more about that. And again, the short-term and long-term strategic planning as just as defined on the other slide. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. So some of the check-in points I was mentioning today that I'm not going to go into too much detail about the high points, but on March 13th, Friday the 13th, there were 750 active Google Classrooms. So teachers were just, before the storm, there were 750 active classrooms. And then on April 2nd or 1st, we were doing some more work with teachers, and there were 924 active classrooms. And then as of the other day, there were almost 1,500 active classrooms. And the data's not in for today yet. The teachers are creating these Google Classrooms and in these environments. Also on March 13th, there was almost 500,000 website visits. We could pull that data from our domain. On April 2nd, it jumped down to 180,000 students on our Chromebooks, but we're back up to 570,000, almost 600,000 individual website visits. Our platform lets me tell me what they're doing. They're looking at Pearson, they're looking at the Khan Academy, they're looking at HMH, the resources provided. I can tell you that more kids are on task now than they were when school was open. There's a lot of on-task behavior. And just in the last 7 days, there's been 40,000 new Google Docs created. They all might be copies of stuff, but there are 40,000 individual Google Docs been created in the last 7 days. And those are some big check-in points. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. Some other check-in points. Now, this might seem not as glamorous as you might think, but since March 16th, which was a Monday, we've had 200 students receive Chromebook help. And if you had to break that down and do the math, the math might be like, well, how many students per day per campus are getting Chromebook help? Now, this is actually a good thing. So that students that are getting the help, we're there to help them on Mondays and Wednesdays. So much so that our students had the Chromebooks that there hasn't been a need for that. But all students deserve to be connected, and we attribute this to the strength of Scholar Plus. But on this being connected, because I don't want to forget this, we're talking about enrichment and we're talking about distance learning, but I can tell you, of those 200 students who came to the campus, I could tell you stories about a great number of them. I can tell you a story of this girl who showed up the first day, an hour before we opened. And I spoke with her and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm the only one working in my family right now. And I need to get a Chromebook because I'm a senior and I need to graduate. And I said, the school's not even open yet. I will help you immediately. I go get the school unlocked. She said, that's fine. I'm going to run by my work and I'm going to come back. And so she came back and she got connected. So she's so excited about graduating. Later in the day, a special ed student came with his father, and the father only spoke Spanish and the student had disabling conditions. And this student, we were able to get them logged on. And the very first thing the student did was go to starfall.com and practice reading and writing. And then the last story I could tell you were families. I was at Pinacati Middle School the other day, and a mom was helping her student check out a Chromebook. And previously, like Mr. Bennett said, she was one of the ones that said, I'm never going to do it. But they went and checked out a Chromebook. And she was a little shy to tell me what she needed it for because she thought it wasn't allowed. She wanted to do her taxes. She wanted to do her taxes so that she would qualify for the stimulus. She also, I spoke with her on a number of other things about making sure that she knew where the resources are. So it was extremely important. So that we're connecting families. So that's important. I wanted you to know. As far as the staff side, we have 450 teachers and probably 400 classified staff members. And within the first few days, we worked with 75 staff members to get them tools that work remotely. So a good number of those were our older MacBook Airs. So about 50, maybe 60 or 70 MacBook Airs to teachers and not teachers, but classified staff and teachers that were working remotely. And the strength of that is our department is really flexible and agile and ready to pivot. They were able to provision these devices. And when people come in, techs who are not teachers, we're also walking through people on how to access the technology. And I've seen techs pivoting. I've seen techs taking calls from students, and they've never done that. I can tell you, Sloba sometimes is hard to understand, but he was sitting there taking phone calls from students and helping them. And I'm extremely proud of what they're doing. So next slide, Ms. Fetzner. So one of the things that I think make us unique, and that's the people. So the people that we've had here, the board has invested in people, not just systems. One of the things that people would tell me about professional development, they'd say, Joe, you invested so much to professional development in people. What if you invest that and they leave? And I often say, well, what if we do nothing and they stay, right? How good are they if we don't invest in professional development in people? So the techs and the tech coaches and the teachers are doing great work. They're doing fantastic work. They're working hard for you. They're working hard for us. And it is a huge shift in teaching and learning. And we're here to support you on that. That's it for me.
Thank you, Joe. Who do we have up next?
That will be me, Mr. President. Good evening, President. Good evening, Board, Mr. Bennett, Cabinet. I'm going to talk about cleaning and sanitation from the M&O perspective. Okay, prior to COVID-19 school closures, custodians were top-down cleaning, using a top-down cleaning method with frequencies and products described at the March 10 study session. Each custodian was just in their normal assigned route, what they're in now. And then we proposed team cleaning, which was pending. So after the school closures, custodians were put on modified schedules beginning on March the 18th. That meant that we had 2 custodians report at each meal service location. That was Perris High School, Pinacati Heritage, and Pinacati. And as the meals were served, one custodian, where the meals were served, and then one custodian would report to all the other locations. We set up our schedule with HR where it was equitable. That means district-wide rotation for this modified schedule for all the custodians, maintenance workers, and all of M&O. Next slide, please. Right now, custodians are disinfecting the kitchen routes and the administration building routes daily as they are being used for essential tasks. This is accomplished by regular cleaning procedures and application of Vindicator. That is our disinfectant that we're using right now. Custodians are using the Vindicators to daily disinfect all hard, non-porous, inanimate environmental surfaces in both the kitchens and administration buildings. These routes also include the restrooms associated with them. Next, please. Somebody sleep? Oh, my bad. Up to an update on the Karcher misters. You know, we had ordered, last time we had met, we had ordered 11 Karchers, and then we had ordered another 6 more. Right now, all we have is 2 that came in. The other 15 have not been delivered yet. So until the Karcher misters arrive, custodians are using the Hudson sprayers and spray bottles to apply the disinfectant in the administration buildings and the restrooms associated with the routes that they're in. As prescribed, the dwell time for the disinfectant is 10 minutes, and then the custodians are wiping them off with microfiber towels. Deep cleaning of all school sites have not been occurred, and collaboration with CSEA continues. Under the current custodial route plan, schools cannot be thoroughly disinfected on a daily basis due to the availability of the time and their tasks according to the CAP program. Next, please. Planning for cleaning and disinfecting posts and beyond PUHSD. We're moving to a team cleaning module. Maintenance operation in collaboration with Hilliard, that's our vendor who we buy our chemicals product. We designed a team cleaning plan to ensure that all PUHSD sites are disinfected on a daily basis. However, if the social distancing mandate is still in effect, then we will not be able to do our team cleaning, and we will stay in our modified cleaning schedule. As alternative, custodians are working their assigned routes with their focus on fully deep cleaning and disinfecting campuses prior to students and staff arriving back to school after the foreclosure is lifted. So we had to put a modified schedule together for maintenance and operation also. How we have it right now, grounds crews, we have 2 grounds crews, and they come in twice a week for 5 hours a day at their sites. Senior skilled maintenance workers on the rotation, only required to physically come in for emergencies only from 6 to 2:30. Initially, the maintenance workers that came in to unplug all unessential items. The HVAC techs are working on the same kind of rotation that the senior skilled maintenance workers are, and they came in to close out work orders and adjust thermostats to non-cleaning times. All M&O staff will be on call during their regular work hours, and we still have our on-call emergency MOT, and they start at 2:30 after every day. Next, please. Oh, that's not me.
Hey, everyone, before we move forward, Art, if I could just add a couple of things to the M&O and facilities presentation.
No.
One of the things that M&O is really doing is being agile, as Joe was mentioning, agility and flexibility and responding to the changing environment that's happening around us. So, I want to commend Art and Ruben and all the M&O guys and all the custodians. Everybody's doing the best they can to address the issues as they come up. And at the beginning of the meeting, before we started the presentation, there was talk of the application of the disinfectant and the way M&O is doing that using the Hudson sprayers, which is an approved application method. It's approved, it's appropriate. The Hudson sprayers and the spray bottles, and the Karcher machines that Art's mentioning that are on their way. It's kind of the Cadillac method of application. It'll be faster, more efficient, and allow disinfecting to happen more quicker and faster, allowing custodians to do their work in a more efficient manner. So I just wanted to touch on those 2 quick points, moving forward.
Thank you, Hector.
Thanks, Art.
All right, next slide, please. All right,
Okay, well, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So I'm going to actually cover the next 3 sections. Many of them aren't lengthy, but we've heard a lot of conversation in all of these parts of the presentations about our employees being flexible, and I could not agree more, particularly as it relates to our nutrition services employees who are being led by Rick Linsalato while Audrey's out on maternity leave. So we have that challenge, and he's certainly risen to that occasion, and we're really, really proud of him, as well as all of the NSAs who had to adapt to things changing on a daily basis, whether it was we could not get certain food items from our vendors, or we ran out of bags and we couldn't find them. So I really appreciate the nutrition services employees. As you know, we've been providing meals to families in our community who need them. That's a condition of our maintaining our funding during the closure. And so I've got a table here that you can see, and we did this Friday. So as of Friday, we'd served almost 144,000 meals. Today, we served meals for both today and tomorrow. We're serving Monday, Wednesday, Friday currently. We'll move to Monday, Wednesday starting next week. And so we've actually, that slide is out of date. We've actually served another 14,000 meals today. So that's great. That's about 34, almost 3,500 families that we serve today across our 4 campuses. So we're pleased with that. But that kind of ends the good news as it relates to meal service. And I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that as compared to when we serve meals when school is in session, so when we're offering meals to over 10,000 students per day, our participation is down. So that's our meals served per day, and that equates to lower revenue. We do get a little bit higher reimbursement under this summer feeding program, which is what we're under right now. But with the lower participation, our revenue is down. The cost per meal is up, and that's just a result of the remaining food items, us trying to go to more prepackaged just because of the sheer volume that we're trying to feed. And then our labor cost, of course, is the same, which means a higher labor cost per meal. So overall, you might be asking what that means. What that means is a deficit to our nutrition fund, which will mean a contribution from our general fund. So I just wanted to make sure, that we're all aware that that will be coming as we proceed here. Anna, if you'd go to the next slide, please. So continuing on with the financial implications, it's probably not a secret. We all watch the news and we hear what's going on with the economy. But there's some significant impacts, or a lot of significant impacts that we'll be facing and are facing as a result of the widespread shutdown of the economy, and how that translates to the state budget and ultimately the state education budget beginning in 2019-20. And you might think that's a typo there because that's this fiscal year, but there is conversation about mid-year cuts beginning this year. And I know we're close to the end of the year, but we may be facing some mid-year cuts. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm hoping that that will be limited just to cash and not budget, meaning our revenue. Some of our revenue would be deferred to the next year, but I'll touch on that in a minute. And all the different players that do the analysis and the projections on our behalf, whether that be school services, Department of Finance, the LAO Legislative Analyst Office, UCLA forecasters. Everybody's analyzing this on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and it's changing that often. And so I just put in a quote here from the Department of Finance in an April 10th letter that they sent to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. And you can read that there, but it says the economic disruption from the pandemic is expected to result in a recession and have significant effects on state revenues. And currently the drop in the stock market may cause further revenue declines. So all the signals are there that we're headed to a recession. And some of those signals were there even before that. And we've talked about that as well. So what's going to happen now? We generally work our budget cycle in that we're preparing next year's budget based on the May revision. That's something you're all familiar with. But due to the interruption in the normal legislative session, the May revision will be what's called a workload budget. And that's a term you're probably not familiar with because we've not talked about that before. We've not been in a workload budget situation. But essentially what that means is we should plan on, or they're saying they are going to consider nothing more than COLA in next year's budget, no new programs. You remember at second interim, and I don't remember if it was Alicia or myself that gave this part of the presentation, but we had a slide that listed all of the many new programs that were being considered. One of those was special ed. There was a lot of new programs that the state was considering. And so when May Revise comes out, it's not going to have any of those new programs. It will likely list a COLA, but we need to keep in mind that that COLA, even though it may be declared, right now it's at 2.29%, it's very likely not going to be funded, or it'll be implemented as a negative COLA. So something that'll come in on the back end. So we just need to keep that in mind. And Anna, if you would go to the next slide. So what does that mean? As I mentioned before, we're usually looking at the May Revise for an indicator of next year's budget. But the May revision and even the State Budget Act for this year will not provide an accurate picture for the state, the education, or the PUHSD budget. And that's just simply because there's not enough data or details to assess the full impact of the state economy until August or September. And so we need to plan on a revision to the adopted state budget. Right now, they're talking about August or September. We're hoping that that's not going to continue throughout the year. Just as an example, one of the levels of detail that we're normally looking at is state income taxes. Well, as we all know, the state income tax deadline was extended from April 15th. So that takes away one of those data points that economists are generally looking at. So the current recommendations, and this comes from FCMAT, Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, who we had a conference call with Friday, is that the current recommendations include planning for a 0% COLA in terms of what's funded as a mid to a high point, and a negative 2% COLA for a low point. But they also cautioned that changes on a weekly and sometimes daily basis. And so their recommendation, and I certainly agree with this, is that we need to do some contingency planning because really in planning our budget for next year, we just don't have a lot of details, and we won't have a lot of details until the year has already started. I talked earlier about the difference in budget and cash, and quite simply, a budget is what we will eventually get, and a cash is the cash flow, the timing of which those revenues come in. What's being talked about right now is for this school year is it's called a deferral of revenue. So our June apportionment, we would get that in July. And so this year we can sustain that with interfund borrowing, but when we get to next year, and those of you that were around in some capacity, you all were around during the last recession, and you remember we were faced with significant deferrals. I think in the 20-30% range, our revenue for one particular year was deferred to the next year. And so we may need to, in conjunction with our interfund borrowing, look to do a trans or a tax and revenue anticipation note. And that's just a borrowing instrument to help us with our cash flow. Oops, I can't, can you go to the next slide? I'm trying to make it move myself. So as for all districts, second interim will serve as a base and allow us to build our budget. As you recall from the two board meetings ago, which was last month when we did the second interim presentation, we are at a 3.12% reserve level. So that doesn't allow us to use our reserves or to dip into those reserves as we're figuring out a plan. It's going to be extremely critical that we have those contingency plans in place like are being recommended. For our district, as well as any other district to some capacity, but certainly districts like ours that are facing some level of declining enrollment, we have those enrollment and ADA considerations that we need to think of as well. For our district, the way I've been describing this is sort of like a three-prong approach. And so so we need to look at this. What percentage of our families will be looking, when school reopens or in August, will be looking for some continued distance learning mechanism? And that can be either because this is working out okay, we like this homeschooling type environment, or just out of fear. We may have some, percentage of our families that just simply don't want to send their students back to school, or they're looking for other charter options like we're already faced with. As we know, the housing market is now declining. There's just simply not a market, or at least not to the same level as there was in January when we made our projections for next year. And then the unemployment impacts we need to study, and we won't have, it's this one of those things that goes to what data points will we have, and we just won't have these yet. So it makes it very difficult to budget for next year. But families that either have lost or will lose their housing or their employment within our district that may relocate to out of the district to stay with, another family member, as an example. So those are all the kinds of things we're going to need to monitor because as we know, enrollment and consequently ADA is really what our budget is based on for the most part. So I am well aware that was a whole lot of doom and gloom. I apologize sincerely for that. But it is important that we're transparent and that the board is aware that we're facing some significant challenges. Just to, put this into perspective, if COLA were to swing by about 4%, because that's kind of what we're talking, we were at 2.29 for next year. If we go to like a negative 2% for next year, that's in the range of $4.5 million. And then that's just next year. The following year, that assuming funding is flat, that's $9 million. But if it goes on the trend of down, that would be even further. So, I called it a workload budget. I've heard definitions where it's called a keep the lights on budget. We're only paying, for things to keep us on life support. And, my intention is not to be doom and gloom, but again, just to be transparent with the things that we're going to be facing. I wanted to end with a little bit of positivity on the financial side. And it's true, yes, we will have some minimal savings in some areas. And so I didn't want to, skirt over that. As Art mentioned in his presentation, he had his HVAC technicians come in and change our thermostats to non-occupied because we want to realize as much utility savings as possible. He's also done things like change the frequency of our trash and recycling pickup. So we're trying to save as many pennies and nickels as we possibly can. We're currently talking with and negotiating with our transportation contractor about realizing some of the savings from fuel. Our SROs, we're only paying for them when they're present. Well, they're not present right now. So while there are certain pots of money out there where we can save money, there's other areas where we are spending more money than we anticipated. One example of that is our substitute employees who have sick leave. Many of them, because they are not working, and certainly they're probably applying for unemployment, but they're taking advantage of and have all of them have been paid out. I think we paid out $350,000 just in certificated substitute sick leave. So those are things that we did not anticipate. So while there are some minimal savings, there's extra expenditures, those kind of balance out. Any of the additional savings, though, certainly doesn't negate the financial implications that we're facing in the future. And then lastly, on the finance side is we will have some additional available funding to us. Again, it doesn't wipe out all of the things that I said previously. Certainly, I wish that it did, but it doesn't. We are receiving SB 117 money. Those are state monies for us to respond to COVID-19 for our district. That's about $159,000, under $160,000. So that's certainly helpful. That can help with some of the cleaning products and PPE and anything like that. We have applied to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So anything we're having to buy, we wouldn't ordinarily buy, we can seek to be reimbursed for. And then there's the federal care stimulus dollars, and we're still learning more about that and what that can be used for and how it will be implemented. But that looks like it will be about $2 million, and we'll have strings attached to it as well. But I'm hoping that will be a little bit more flexible than what they're talking about now, that can help with some of these things I talked about earlier. But the fact is, we just don't know at this point. Okay, I am done with finances. If we could move on, Ms. Fetzer. So our reopening planning and considerations. The one thing I'll say here is we just don't know what we don't know yet. But I think the word was used earlier. We all have to be agile and adapt to the changing circumstances. And I think we certainly have been, everybody in the district throughout this process. But we're going to continue to follow the guidance and the directives from all of these agencies that you see listed here. And that's for anything from, when and how or can we provide or perform graduation ceremonies, what might those look like? To when we actually reopen for students, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. Will we test students and staff before re-entering? We don't know the answers to those questions yet, but we will follow the guidelines and/or the directive if they come out as directives from public health and other agencies. So we'll continue to follow these agencies like we have. You probably saw in the news, I think it was last Tuesday, that Governor Newsom outlined the 6 key indicators that the state of California will consider before modifying the stay-at-home order. Similarly, I can't remember if it was the same day or the next day, President Trump issued guidelines for opening up America again, and I've got links to these in there as well. And so certainly we'll follow the state orders and obviously the county orders as it relates to all the various things that go along with reopening our campuses, hopefully sooner rather than later, but obviously making sure that we're safe and healthy first. If you go to the next slide. So those of you that heard that press conference on April 14th from Governor Newsom, he shared his vision of what schools could look like, not would, but could look like when they reopen. And he indicated that was possibly in the fall. If you recall, prior to that, Governor Newsom was talking about schools perhaps being closed physically this entire calendar year. So it's possibly a way to take that as a sign that he's moving that forward, but with some conditions. And he really focused on that number 5 in his 6 essential pieces there. And that's what is our ability to support physical distancing? And you're all around schools and know that could be quite difficult and complex, but some of the things that the governor talked about, and again, these aren't mandates yet, just they were his initial talking points, was staggered bell schedules, looking at how students would congregate during meal times, assemblies, recess for our younger students. And then the governor also emphasized, which of course we know, the need for deep sanitation and massive deep cleaning as a necessary precaution to reopen schools. And he also indicated that he's having intense conversations with the state superintendent of public instruction and other important players there. So while we don't have all of the answers for how and when we'll reopen school, that at least provides the framework to us and to you. And I think I'm done there. Back to you, boss.
I need to open my microphone before I start talking. Our next steps as we move forward, we're going to continue to monitor through the county health and the governor and Tony Thurman from the superintendent of public instruction for direction on how we move forward on a lot of these things. But we're going to continue to work with our various stakeholders within the district, our parents, our staff, the board of trustees, because we have to make informed decisions as we move forward. We can't be out there on our own just trying to figure things out. We do need to follow some of the directions being given by those different agencies. We want to make sure we're keeping the board informed of what's happening as we move forward. Our plan is every board meeting will have a presentation on the COVID-19 items, what's come up lately. But we wanted to get some direction from the board on what they would like to see. Would they like to see a meeting in between the board like a study session like we have now every month in between, or maybe we do every other week we do an update emailed out to the board saying these are the new things happening, this is what we're working on, this is what we see as come up in our future. So those are the things we wanted to get some direction from the board on how they would like to see that. As you heard tonight from all of our presentations, there's a lot of things happening throughout the district and throughout the county as to educate students and keep people safe and healthy. Our goal is that's always our number one priority, is keeping our staff, our students, and our families healthy. And we're going to continue to move forward on that. Mr. Stafford, I didn't know if you had any direction you would like to see us move as far as more information being given out.
Okay. One of the first things that we should do is get the copy of this presentation to all the board members. A lot of information here. So we can get our questions to you. I'm sure we have some now, but let us, you used to give us a weekly report. You can continue to do that, put it in there, or meetings, whatever the board finds easier to do. But you need that exchange in conversation about the items that would be of concern. So let's talk to the board members first. I'm going to go down the list as roll call and see opinions from each one. Let's start with Dr. Arau. Are you there?
Yes, President Stafford.
Okay, let's start with you and see what comments you have on, Rand, I believe, adding a special meeting more frequently, bi-weekly, or um, putting it in the weekly report, or how we're going to communicate, but we need to get our opinions back to Mr. Bennett and be able to discuss them. So what do you think about that format? And do you have some other comments also?
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think that whatever is easier for Mr. Bennett is as long as we are informed, right? That is really important. That's what I can say in terms of that. Do you want us to make the decision right now, Mr. Bennett?
I was just looking for direction from the board and what the board members would like to see as we're moving forward to make sure we keep you as informed as possible.
Yeah. Either way, I'm okay with anything if we want to have the meetings or if it's going to be in writing. I just would like to ask if you can forward to us this presentation. I was
We'll get that out to you in an email, because there's links there. If you have an electronic copy, you'd be able to access those links and see everything that's in there. So we'll get that out to you either this evening or tomorrow morning.
Okay.
yes. And are we ready to make the comments also, Mr. Stafford?
Yeah, why don't we go through both of those items with each board member?
Okay, and then we come back to different comments. Okay.
Mhm. No, you could go ahead and make your, if you want to hit on other subjects from the presentation.
Okay. I was going to
Yeah.
make a comment and say a thank you to Mr. Bennett and Cabinet for this very thorough and a complete presentation. Thank you also to you for organizing, making the decision, and for your decision and the leadership to keep our board informed through this study session. And this was a very comprehensive and thorough presentation. I was smiling when we went over all of this because I said, hey, it's very comprehensive and very thorough, but it was a lot at the same time. And some of us, we had been trained on focus note taking in order to keep track of everything. But if I can make a suggestion, if there is another presentation, maybe after every department finish, giving us the opportunity to ask the questions, because it's just too much. And probably I appreciate that you have us at that level of understanding, and that we can remember things or we can take those notes. But it would be important, I think, after every opportunity, after every presentation, at least from the department, I'm not talking about every slide, right? Use kind of the same strategies that we use with our students, not necessarily checking for understanding directly with us, but give us the opportunity for us to check for that understanding. If that would be possible, yeah, that would be great.
And we can make that happen.
Okay, on those terms, I was looking for my notes before my. Let me write them down because I was taking them on my phone, and my cell phone is running out of battery. Right, but something that I noticed in one of the presentations was that we continue to monitor provisions of both MOUs and let me see, let me write it down. Okay, I have everything written here. And one of my suggestions, and I know that this is a public session. If at any time this is not appropriate for the public session, please stop me, President Staff or Mr. Bennett, and tell me we need to talk about this later on or in another session. I was after we approved the MOU last time, I learned from different districts that they have included in their MOUs some kind of recognition for our classified staff members who are leaving their homes and going to the sites or to the district in order to perform part of their responsibilities or their job, right? Let's say specifically our employees or staff members from nutrition services. They are working there on a daily basis, providing those the meals to our students in our community. In another districts, they have been recognized, we can say, because as we know, we have some staff members, and I'm just, for example, campus supervisors. They are at home, they are getting paid exactly the same that our employees who are coming to work. That is the nature of their job, right? I mean, don't take me wrong, I'm not saying that's what we are doing. We are paying everybody, but we have another employees that they are leaving their homes and they are working there. So that being said, have we thought about providing that kind of recognition or compensation? Some districts they are doing for every hour that they are working, not at home, right? Because we have secretaries and we are working here at home. Well, that is part of what we were expected to do. But if they go outside their home to perform their duties for every hour that they do that, if they can get 1 hour of a sick day, for example, right? Or another districts, is my understanding, they are offering time and a half for those hours. In order to not only to provide a recognition, but to be safe, to be fair, with everybody. We have some staff members that are at home by nature of their duties, they are not doing anything and they are getting the same pay that the other staff members who are there. So that is one of the comments that if it can be discussed in the next few minutes, that's okay. If we need another session to do that. The other thing was in terms of the masks and the protection for our staff members. We talked last time, it was my understanding that they were using the bandanas, but we did, it is my understanding that now they are using face masks. I'm not talking about the N95, right? We know that those are for our heroes, the health providers, doctors, nurses, that they are fighting this disease right there on the front, at the battle when this is happening. The other question was the inventory of the masks that we have. We talk, is my understanding, 2,500 of one type, 2,500 of another one, close to 5,000. The ones who are 95, are we going to donate those to the hospitals, to the places where they really need it, and we can make a difference, protecting those the people, the nurses, the doctors who are fighting this disease, and that they don't have access to that. In the meantime, they get access, right? You hear different opinions. The state officials, they are saying, no, we don't have enough resources. The federal government says, yes, you do, and things like that, but that is not a place to talk about that. Basically, the question is, we have that inventory. What is the plan? And thirdly, I don't remember hearing, I want to ask a question and then I'm going to continue with my comment. Mr. Bennett, are we planning or did we cancel graduation for our students?
We postponed graduations for the students at this point because the graduations would be happening when we're still in the close down session through June 19th.
Okay.
So we're looking for, as we move forward, get the direction from the health office and the governor to decide, would we be able to have a graduation maybe in July, or do we have to look at other options as we move forward?
Okay.
Maybe into December.
If we don't have it in July, are we looking at December? Or what are the long-term plans in case or the issue or the idea is if it doesn't happen in July and it's not possible in December, cancel it and not offer anything? What is the big picture, the big idea?
The big picture would be we were hoping for July, and I brought up December because if we have kids going away to college, they'd be home then from college, and maybe we could get the graduation going during those times when they're home. But we still don't know. There's been talk that we may not even be able to open the schools up until after December, so we're still in limbo on a lot of those things. But we are making brainstorming how we could make those things happen in the most expedient time.
Okay, so summarizing in few words, the idea is to have a graduation. We just don't know when.
Exactly.
It might be July, it might be December, it might be June 2021, but we will have a graduation.
We will have graduations, yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to confirm that.
Those kids have worked so hard for the 12, 13 years to get to that point. We want to honor them as as soon as we can to give them the recognition they deserve for finishing up that through our schools.
Okay, no, I completely agree with that. The reason that I was asking you is because there are some districts that they are doing some kind of a virtual graduation. So I just wanted to have that in my mind. At this point, we are not looking at virtual graduation. We are looking at the real traditional graduation. The only thing is that we don't know the date. And depending how things evolve, we are going to postpone it until we have it.
Correct.
Because our students deserve that and our families also. Okay, thank you so much. Those were my comments.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rao. Next up, we'll have Trustee Garcia.
I personally would like to see weekly updates unless questions arise where we need to discuss this in either open or closed session. I think, I can make myself available. That's not even an issue. I just think for sake of time and gathering everybody to stop what they're doing and conduct a meeting might take a little bit more work than a weekly update. I apologize. I was looking down. I was actually taking notes on what Dr. Arauz was talking about. Some of the things, now I'm going to go into my part of questions and comments. Some of the comments that I heard was deep cleaning. And then I know Wednesday we were talking about sanitizing. So to me, there's a huge difference. I don't think the board was even suggesting deep cleaning at this time. I believe we were talking about sanitation for all this workstations of essential employees. So I don't know if we have that in operation. I don't know if we have the proper equipment. I'm hearing something of the Hudson. I'm not exactly familiar with that machine, but I know there's machines around. And then I'm hearing that people say their machines and the shipment came in and then they haven't come in. So I'd like to know are the offices, for example, is the IT in the district office, is it being sanitized weekly, daily, every other day? That is one of the main things that I'm concerned about. And then another thing we talked about was masking. I believe it was Wednesday we had the meeting. And Mr. Bennett, you said you could have that taken care of by Thursday. Were we able to issue masks other than bandanas?
We got them out. They actually came out on Monday of this week.
Okay.
So
Okay.
but we did get them out to each site, but they're allowed to wear the bandanas or neck things or homemade masks if they feel more comfortable with those things. But we did make those available to anybody that wants them.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. And then I heard Dr. Arouse talking about donating the N95 masks to the medical field. Is that possible since we have so many in stock? And I do hear the governor always asking businesses to convert to start making N95s because there's such a demand for them. Is that a possibility, or do we absolutely need the N95s in our district right now?
I can meet with our staff and look at that to see if we have some that would be okay to go ahead and donate to the local hospitals. We'll talk about that. Judy just jumped in, so maybe Judy has a comment there.
Okay.
Would you like, I'm happy to comment. We've got a couple different plans where we would be required to have N95s for our staff. As soon as the weather turns warm, if there was possible fire, there was a new OSHA regulation that started last January, where for wildfire smoke, if any staff is working outside, we would be required by OSHA to provide an N95 for staff. It could be campus supervisors or custodians who are working outside. We need to be able to provide them when school resumes as well. Of course, we don't know when, right? We would also need N95s in our health office. Those would be for our health techs. The surgical masks, we're hoping to still have some of what we have for isolating any student or staff that was ill. That's part of our aerosolized transmittable disease plan, ATD. That's another OSHA requirement. So on the health side, we would need N95s for health office staff or anyone helping in the health office. The surgical mask, if we still have some, we would use to help isolate and separate any student who might come in who is coughing until they could get, taken home. So those supplies, I personally know, I won't mention the names, but I do know some districts that donated quite a bit and now they're looking for replacements and they can't find them. We do have some more ordered for both N95s and surgical masks. Our order was originally set to come in June, and then we were recently told that the back order is now till December. So finding more will be the problem or the challenge, So there are certainly certain times that we would need to make sure we have them for our staff.
Okay. The reason why I asked that, and we have approximately how many staff members in the district?
About 1,000.
About 1,000? Because here, my math could be wrong, but that looks like 4,900 N95s. Do we need that many, or do we need more, or what would you recommend, Ms. Judy?
Well, those are single use, so you have to remember you don't just give it to them. I know our nurse said we could reuse them, so they could, as long as they're not soiled. It just depends on how long somebody's wearing it. If they're in health, if they're outside all for hours with fire smoke, that's not going to be a single. That's going to be a single use item. So it's not like you give somebody one face mask and they have it for a week or a month or for the school year. It's a one time. It's a single use or maybe a couple days depending on the conditions. As soon as they're wet, the surgical masks, they can also be reused for a nurse. As soon as they get wet, then you got to toss them. So that's the thing. It's not like I have one I can give everybody and we're covered. It would just be, and honestly, we don't know, right? And so we had it in preparation for the fire. Honestly, the fire smoke, because those small particulates can be very dangerous. I know this whole situation with COVID-19 has changed that. So now we're happy we have them in case we need them to protect staff when school comes back. We could also be faced with a situation where we have a shelter set up by the county. So we would have staff helping in the shelter. And now we have public coming in. We have no idea if they're sick or not. So we would want to have N95s for our staff if we were manning a shelter, if they use one of our sites for maybe a vaccination clinic. On a side note too, right now anyone can be tested. So anyone can call the county and be tested, but they might, once they have a vaccination or maybe antigen test, they could use school sites to facilitate that for the public. So again, we would be required. When you looked at, when you go back and look at the presentation, the governor's 6 steps, like Candace was talking about, step 5, and that's about, step 5 talks about whether businesses and schools can sustain social distancing. And when you look at the couple questions that they asked, they talk about social distancing, and then also, do we have the equipment and supplies needed to protect staff? So I wouldn't want to have to be in the situation where now we can't protect our own staff.
Right. And based on that comment alone, because what made me think about this was the fact that everybody who's in an elected position, whether it's a school board, county officials, and higher ups, I hear a lot of, well, you didn't act soon enough. You had the technology, you had the equipment, and it could have prevented X, Y, and Z. And that's my thought process, you know. So if we have it, why not use it? You know, I see all these businesses in the private sector, at least, converting their businesses into manufacturing of the N95s. And you know, I'm more concerned of the surgical masks, to be honest with you, for the staff within the district, or at least the essential employees who are exposing themselves. Better, that's more protection than a bandana. You know, I know the county has had set some standard out there saying it is acceptable for the public, but at the same time, if you have to expose yourself to the public or to the possibility when you clean or you're distributing food, there's that possibility of the contact with the virus. So I would hope we would show to the employees that we care more, and rather than just providing bandanas, and maybe at the minimum a surgical mask. Of course, you know, you guys are giving them the option, and I support that. But I do want to move on with everything, all the notes we have here. So that talks about the N95s, the masks were issued. Yes, Dr. Arouse, I like your idea of the compensation financially to the essential workers, even anything, whether it's a monthly stipend, you know, I don't know how it works out. I don't know everything in regards to money or, you know, time off, a sick day. I like that idea. I support you on that. You know, Mr. Bennett, you asked for us to give you direction in regards to the meetings. I think I gave you direction, but if it leads to direction, I support Dr. Rouse's suggestion. I don't know if you guys have to give a direction to the unions and negotiate. I don't know, because this is a great idea. I'm just excited to hear other people are thinking like that too. And that's it for me, Mr. President.
Okay.
Tony, Mr. Scorpanish would like to jump in for a second to share some information.
Oh, sure. Mr. Scorpanish.
I'd like to address, Dr. Rouse asked the question about premium pay, and then we never circled back to that one. So I wanted to make sure that we got that, and you brought it up, Edward, so that's a good segue. So that is a negotiable item. It would be something that we would need to negotiate with the associations. And what was one of the things that we actually negotiated with the association initially, when we talked to them about developing the initial MOU that will sunset at the end of the month. And part of that discussion was around, goes along with what we knew that Candace was sharing in her report, or at least the speculation that we had with that in terms of the cost. But it's absolutely something that we can negotiate and we can work on with them. What we did is, in lieu of that, we did develop a rotational basis where we're rotating employees instead of having those employees come in on a regular basis. We're rotating them, and so some employees only come in like once a week if they are called to come in, as opposed to being called regularly come in. So we're trying to be sensitive to that. That was what we worked on with them. So, but it is, just to answer your question, it is a negotiable item.
Thank you.
Yes, and that MOU is going to be worked on very soon. So with the other one expiring, I believe, on the 30th. Okay, Trustee Garcia, do you have some more for us? Or?
Not really, except that again, I want to thank Mr. Bennett, Cabinet. Everyone's doing a fantastic job. IT department, food services, custodians, ground maintenance, everybody who is an essential employee. Thank you for everything. Thank you for taking the time out and exposing yourself and away from your families. I just want to thank you all. You're brave. You're very brave, and I commend you for everything you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Garcia. Next would have been Dr. Freeman, but he's not available for this meeting. Trustee Nelson, are you there?
I am. Thank you for letting me speak here. I do want to thank everybody that was busy on putting that presentation together. That was, like Mr. Rouse said, Dr. Rouse said, it was complete and exhaustive, and we got a very, very good overall view of what the district is going through right now. I've been trying to keep myself abreast on a lot of this information as we've been going, so I don't have a lot of questions, but I am in favor of some kind of recognition or pay for the people who are on the front lines, who are having to deal with this on a day in, day out basis and putting themselves in harm's way, essentially. I would like to look into the possibility of a virtual graduation, because I know a physical graduation is preferable, and I would love to see a physical graduation, but once school gets out, a lot of these students are going to go their own way, and they may not be available for a graduation. And I would like to do something for them, honestly, because they've been putting so much. This is a culmination of their entire educational, their whole K-6. This is what they built up for, and some of these families this will be their only graduation, the first graduation in a family, or something of that nature. The last time they get a chance to see their friends or something of that nature. So I would really like to see some kind of virtual graduation, if it's possible. If it looks like the physical graduation is not going to happen this year, I would really like to see a virtual graduation happen. Like I said, I appreciate all the information that was given, because that was a lot of information that we've been having to go through for the last couple of months. And thank you everybody for putting a time and effort into it. Thank you to all the people who are on those front lines and putting yourselves in harm's way. And like I said, I don't have a lot of questions, but one more thing, I did want to say that I'm in favor of having a weekly update. I don't think we need to have a special board meeting every other week or something like that, unless something major happens, unless there's a major change, or because right now we're status quo right now, and unless that changes drastically, I don't foresee us needing to have a special board meeting like every other week. I'm okay with having an update every week. So that would be my preference as well. So that's it for me. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, President Stafford. That'll be it for mine.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Nelson. That leaves myself. Well, you just finished with the meeting schedule, and I agree that a weekly update would be fine, unless we needed to disseminate other information that was urgent. I don't think that we need to meet more than weekly update, and we can always contact Mr. Bennett, and if we have questions, and then go from there. I have a number of items. Number one, the presentation was very good. It answered a lot of the questions, so I don't have to ask some. I can skip through some new ones. The MOU we'll discuss as soon as Mr. Skorpanich is able to get through his meetings and see where we can get on that for pay for the staff. There was an item that CSE Josh Rushing, the president, brought up about teachers removing their personal items from the classrooms. I would definitely like to see that done. I mean, we should at least be in a summer mode where more cleaning can be done, and there doesn't have to be any disruption or problems between teachers and other staff about what's going on with their personal items. So if they could do that, that would be great. Also, in the process, as we start these new cleaning process, you need to have feedback from the custodians. We always come out with a list of rules and regulations, but we need to talk to our custodians, see what is practical, and our kitchen workers and nutrition services. And I would like to see, at minimum, if we at least get that PPE to the custodians and to those people, because they are the ones doing the actual hands-on breathing chemicals, doing all the certain things that have to be done to keep a school in great shape. So PPEs definitely for the custodians and nutrition services, I would say, and you could kind of judge on an ongoing basis who would need it, who's dealing with the public right now while we're closed. Um, Next was internet access, and Joe, this was one that you guys. I wanted to thank the technology department because you have really kept us up to speed where our kids can keep learning, and they're just not going to fall by the wayside. I was wondering one thing now, if a child does not choose to use his Chromebook or doesn't choose to use the work, I think we had talked about you could kind of disseminate that data. You would know, be able to track and see that they're on the programs and they're doing certain things. Not down to the grades that they're getting because we're not grading that, but to know that they're actually, if there's kids out there that just aren't catching on, and doing the work. I'd like to know about that. Jose, did you want to say something? Okay, I thought I saw Dr. Rouse's hand up. Okay, your mic's not on if you wanted to say.
Can't hear you, Dr. Rouse.
Can't hear you. You got to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I was not able to hear a lot of several things, so I didn't know. I know that I missed something, but I can talk with you later for a final update. I'm having some technical difficulties,
Oh,
and yeah, I don't know if there was a further discussion in terms of, and basically it was with the sound. I think it's my system for a potential virtual graduation. I know that we said the summary is summarizing. We are looking at having a traditional in-person graduation, but there is a lot of uncertainty. We don't know if we can have it in December, if we can even have it in June. So our students have been working really hard, and this is for our parents also. I, as a parent, I can tell you how you feel, and all the ones who have kids who have gone through this graduation process, how proud you are to hear their names and they walk in through the stage. So something to keep in mind and to really, really celebrate this a big accomplishment for our students. I used to say some time ago, they might be the only opportunity that they might have. But I changed my mind, and I know what I'm telling my students is this is your first or second opportunity to walk through the stage. Maybe you did it in middle school, but don't think that it's going to be your last one. Okay?
yes.
Keep that side, that ultimate goal for college to continue. And even if you don't start college next week, after even when you start working, still have that in your mind. So I don't want to say that's going to be the only opportunity that they might have, but it's really, really important. And I don't know what is your position and Mr. Garcia and Mr. Nellison's position, and I don't know if it was any further discussion because I'm telling you, I missed several items a lot. Yes.
I think Trustee Nellison and Garcia did comment on that. Trustee Nellison, you had made a comment about virtual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, Trustee Garcia, go ahead.
I do support a virtual graduation if if we can't do anything else, obviously. Mr. Nelson, spot on. You know, while you were talking about it, the idea came to me. I don't know if it would work or if it wouldn't work, but is there a central area we could come in, take the graduates' picture in their cap and gown and make a video of it and live stream it, you know, and then everybody chime in, whatever, do whatever the district want. Just something creative. I think they deserve it. You know, like you said, Dr. Rouse, this is their first and hopefully not their last one. I love it. But, you know, I wanted to highlight something, Mr. President, that I totally forgot to mention. I read the labor reps statement again after Mr. Bennett emailed it, and it mentioned the fact of deep cleaning. Now, there's a difference between deep cleaning and sanitizing. I'm talking about the sanitation of the workstations, not deep cleaning, because I do believe that, you know, the deep cleaning that's planned during the summer. And then, you know, it's a lot of collaboration and more intensive work, and they have a lot of structure. And I'm going to support her statement. It does expose them a little bit more, you know, but I still want to talk about sanitation, not deep cleaning. And that's the position I'm taking.
And I also want to say that deep cleaning really shouldn't happen until, like President Stafford, like you said, the teachers got all their stuff out of their classrooms.
Exactly.
Because it should all be shut down. Like you said, we should be in the mode where we're thinking about like summertime, where people are going to take all their stuff and then you can deep clean it. And that can happen pretty much any time, since we know the students are not going to be back in the classrooms.
Yeah.
So
let's hear from Director Fritz. He's back on that issue.
Hi guys. What the custodians are doing now in their essential areas that they have to come in the kitchens and admin and bathrooms, they're disinfecting every day. That means they're putting the vindicator on all hard surfaces. They're waiting the dwell time, then they clean it off with the microfiber after 10 minutes. They're emptying all the trash, they're vacuuming, and they're cleaning all restrooms daily. That's in the kitchen and the kitchens and the admins. At the district office, SSC, and district office is every day because we're here every day. At PAL, Perris Lake, SSC, and I think I'm missing one. No, I think that's all of them. That they come in on Wednesdays to do the mail and stuff like that. So we send a custodian that's for the district office. That custodian goes and spend the time there to disinfect the areas in the bathrooms that they have been in. So we met with Dean, we just now added Charles Newman and Michael at Perris Lake, not Perris Lake, I mean at PAL. So they go after they go do the mail and stuff that they have to do, then we send the custodian over there to disinfect the areas that they have touched.
Mr. Fritz, what about your building and the IT department as well?
Right, that's done every day also. DAC, I'm counting the IT department, and then they go to the M&O shop.
Okay, beautiful. That's what I want to hear, because I know you guys
it's done every day. And then the Hudson sprayer, when you go back to the cartridges, all of my cartridges are not in. I only received 2 last Friday. So the Hudson sprayer is a tank. I don't know if you ever use that in grounds or anything like that, but we feel that with Vindicator, and it's easier for them to carry that and go through and just adjust that tip so it sprays almost like a mister. It's fast.
On average, how long does it take to do a building?
They start here at 7 o'clock at the district office because of all the staff are not here. They can be out of here in an hour. That's disinfecting everything, doing all the bathrooms, vacuuming, upstairs, downstairs, and over at the tech department. Remember, everybody's not here now, though. So it's different when we have a full staff.
Okay, and the other question I have in related to the spraying and sanitation, how long does it take to kill like bacteria on a desk?
The dwell time that the Vindicator states is 10 minutes. So we let him dwell for 10 minutes. We let it dwell for 10 minutes.
Okay, very good.
He come upstairs and then he start, we try to hit Grant's office first because he's there. If he goes around and spray all the way around all the surfaces, all the offices, and then make it back to purchasing, by the time he goes back around, it's time to clean up. He can start back in Grant's office and start cleaning and coming back in that cycle.
Oh, got it. Okay. That's what I wanted to hear, because we didn't hear that those buildings were sanitized. But thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that.
All right.
Can I make a comment, Edward?
Yes.
So in the tech area, one of the things with numerous procedures that we've created also. So techs are not allowed to share tools right now. They're not allowed to work at each other's workstations. They should never sit at another person's desk and use their phone. They should not use another person's mouse or keyboard. They should not be touching the monitors. So, you know, we're about half of the people on and half the people off, and it's something we cover with them every day because there are a lot of unknowns with this virus on people who could have it and don't exhibit symptoms. And to get into my department, you have to sanitize your hands at the door. You have to set your personal bags and purses, if you have a purse, somewhere else. And there's numerous steps that you have to take to get in. As you know, that you did come by the other day, there's some painter's plastic up, sort of like a sneeze guard per se, to create layers of protection for the techs. And we'll explore other levels of protection as we go. So when the custodians come in the morning, they spray that what is that, whatever that is that Art sprays, Vindicator, and then they let it dwell and they clean it up. But we do our best to not need too much cleanliness, but we keep them pretty sanitized over here.
See, and when you guys tell us everything that you're telling us, especially right now, this is the stuff we want to hear. So when the public asks us these questions, I want to say this is why Perris Union is so fantastic. They're ahead of the curve. They're already on it, you know, and they're taking necessary steps. I love that. Thank you, everybody. I didn't get to say thank you to Judy because her screen went off real quick. But thank you, Judy, for all the information, and I like how you explained that in depth. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Garcia, Trustee Nelson. I was where I left off is technology and the ability to get internet out to the families that don't have it. Were we able to do that? Get hotspots out, or did we have much of a role that we had to play in that? That we made sure everybody was had access.
So one of the things, President Stafford, is that, you know, like I said, we've been doing this since 2013. So we've done our best prior to this public health crisis to make sure that students are connected. We've done our best prior to this public health crisis to work with teachers to scope and sequence their lessons that do not require kids to, you know, complete an assignment on Friday night and deliver it at midnight online. So teachers pretty much have scope and sequence their lessons so they wouldn't have to heavily rely on technology, that they can use things offline. When it comes to getting Wi-Fi to the students or broadband to the students, that is a challenge. That is a huge challenge. Like I said, we wanted every broadband provider to jump on the Keeping America Connected pledge and getting connectivity to the campuses. Some districts are putting Wi-Fi on buses and parking them at apartment buildings. That's really glamorous, but I can tell you that there have been other districts that have done that, and the batteries on the buses last a half hour to an hour. And also that was during a time where we were not where it was okay to be outside and be huddled around a school bus. It's not really okay to be outside and huddled around a school bus. So it's glamorous and people get in the news for it, but it's not practical. I can tell you, going forward, the most practical thing this government can do is let E-rate money allow me to buy devices that are always connected. So if I was to be able to buy Chromebooks that were always connected and not dependent on Wi-Fi, that would be equitable. So it wouldn't matter if they were in Quail Valley, off of Cottonwood Canyon, or over here by the district office, that those would always be connected. So we have not been able to, and the last part is, I contacted a lot of providers about access to hotspots, and nobody has them. They're out of them. They're difficult to get. So it's difficult.
So sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Rao, you were waving your hand there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that is also a really nice idea if the government can provide that, but we don't have it at this time. So in few words, at this time, we don't have the capability to support, and that's not a problem. We can just admit it. It's not under our control. It's not under our control, right? We cannot help the students at this time with the resources that we have. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Williamson? I was told that about the hotspots. I don't know what company we are using, but we are giving top priority to foster kids. And it is my understanding, according to the information, that it costs like $100 a month to have that. I can try to get more information on that. I'm doing the request for one foster student that they don't have access to the internet, and the district is going to pay for those for the $100 a month. Is that is something that you have heard that those companies charging that? And what you are saying is there are no companies available to do it here in
So,
Texas?
I misspoke about we don't have any. We have the district a few years ago, the tech department did a proof of concept to help another department deal with students, help students who were on home hospital, our most medically fragile students who did not have Wi-Fi at home. And so we partnered in my department with Khajiit Hotspots. And Khajiit, I don't know their pricing, but Khajiit Hotspots were the best option for us because they're filtered. So Khajiit's business model is that these hotspots come filtered. So it's difficult to take a hotspot and just hand it to a kid because now it's unfiltered. They could get on their phone, they could get on their Chromebook, they can get on anything, and now we've given them access to the bad stuff. So Chromebooks are filtered. We have an extension on it that cannot be removed, that our Chromebooks are filtered no matter where they are. We can also get self-harm alerts, and we can get other alerts on them. So being filtered is part of our compliance for E-rate. So we do have a contract with Khajiit, and I'm more than happy to work with the district on looking at what other options they have. Now, in the local provider that's issuing hotspots is T-Mobile. We've heard that T-Mobile's doing it also. So if we can't solve every problem, what I would like to do is create a priority list of foster children, if I hear you correctly, our most medically fragile home hospital. So to answer your question, partially so, we've been doing that with the most medically fragile, but what I would like to see then is to create a priority list of students who are the most needy and work our way up. Is that correct?
Yes. From what I heard then from you is we are doing it. We are providing hotspots at this time.
A small number to the most home hospital medically fragile, we have them, yes.
Okay. So some recommendation that I will do at the personal level, and I don't know how much weight it carries, but based on the principles and values, and I want to make a comment, President Stafford, about that in the next few minutes, if you allow me.
Sure.
Our foster kids, they are going through this situation. It's hard for regular students who have their families. Imagine the ones who don't have that. So if it would be possible to support our foster kids, if I may give that recommendation, as well as our seniors who need access to those hotspots in order to complete their assignments. And basically we can say seniors who are failing, who have the opportunity to improve their grade, if that can be part of the priority, that would be a recommendation that I would make to the district, right? Based on our commitment to help our students, and due to the current circumstances, that's why we are prioritizing. There is tomorrow for the juniors. We can help them next semester maybe or later on. But for the seniors, that's it, right? They need to improve those grades if they are failing, and if they want to do it, it would be sad that for whatever reason they didn't do it before. But if there is a commitment, it would be sad that because of financial reasons and not having access to the internet, that they don't get the credits or the passing grade and the credit to graduate. That would be my 10 cents, 5 cents, or I don't remember how to say. So I think 10 cents.
I agree with you, and I can tell you, Dr. Rowell, it's a great point. And when we were communicating with the staff about the need to get kids connected, just so you know, the probably first 2 or 3 messages to me did not talk about teaching and learning at all. It talked about people needing to be connected to reach out to medical practitioners to make sure that their lights don't get turned off, to make sure that they could fill out their tax funds to get their stimulus check. So access to health information, being able to communicate with their families in other parts of the country. So just so you know, it's extremely important to me. Teaching and learning is important too.
Okay, very good. Dr. Rao, you had more statement, or you?
Oh, I was just, and thank you, because I forgot before, during the last board meeting, and I'm planning to reiterate this more for potential audience that is not here and were there in the last meeting. There was a comment from Mr. Garcia in terms of a concern or a rumor or somebody saying about board members making decisions in the same direction, and if there was some communication prior to those decisions. If I remember correctly and understood correctly, that was the gist of the comment. Dr. Freeman emphasized, and he was completely right, if that could be the case, that could be a violation of the Brown Act. What I can tell you, my comment is in this, in the following way. You don't need to talk with other board members about specific situations if you share the same principles, the same values, the same educational philosophy, to be committed to do what is in the best interest of our students, what is right, what is fair for everybody, for our staff, for our employees, for our administrators, and for our students. Therefore, that being said, it is so important if we share those that I know that we do it. So it might come across as oh, you talk about that. No, we have embedded already those values and principles and educational philosophy, and that's what we filter our decisions, right? And that lead us to approve or disapprove proposals or items or situations that come to our table, to our board, right? And so I just wanted to make this comment because it's interesting, right? That at some point people might think like that, but whenever you have that summarizing, we share that, and I'm really happy to have you as colleagues and to share those values and principles and act on them. So our actions are a result, and our decisions are a result of those beliefs and principles. That was it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rouse. That was very good. I agree. I have some other items, but they're not crucial. I think they can wait. I can talk to Mr. Bennett. I just want to take the opportunity to thank, first of all, Joe, who was just on, Joe Williams. Technology has done a great job, and it seems to me is what's going to hold this district together. And you know, I know your staff, your techs, your TOSAs, that they work hard, and you yourself really support us to have these virtual meetings and to be able to communicate. And I would just want to thank you very much, Joe, for that. I'd like to thank all the managers who have directors, whatever the title may be. Judy Miller, thank you so much for your information. And I have more questions, but they're more general, and they would take, you know, we've been here quite a while, and I think that these are more general, and a lot of times they're answered in the news. And as I go through the presentation, if there's something that I see, but so just thank you to all of you that have participated, and if anyone has any final comments, we'll give you that opportunity. So at this time, item 5.1 is adjournment of the special board meeting of the Board of Trustees for April 20th, 2020. Do I have a motion
So
to?
moved. So moved.
Who is that, Dave?
That was it.
And who was second?
I'll second.
You'll second on Trustee Garcia. So the motion is by Trustee Nelson and second by Trustee Garcia. Upon a roll call vote, I guess we do have to vote on something here. Do we vote on this grant? Okay. So let's go with Dr. Rao,
Aye.
Trustee Garcia.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman is absent, and Trustee Nelson.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Upon the roll call vote being taken, the vote was 4 to 0, with one abstention or one absent.
An absence, yeah.
So we are adjourning at 5:24 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.
See you guys
Thank
later.
you, everybody. Nice seeing you.
Okay.
All
We'll
right.
see you soon.